الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. After praising Allah and sending peace, blessings and salutations upon the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and upon his family and his companions, I'd like to start by welcoming everyone who came here today, and also by congratulating all of you for coming early and getting here right at the start of the course. Because I know what tends to happen is people filter in late after an hour and a half. But if we want to get the most out of the course, then we're definitely going to have to try to maximize our time and get the most out of our time. And I always say to people in my lectures that time is worth so much more than any other commodity that you have. It's worth a lot more than money. It's worth a lot more than the possessions that you have. Because money you can lose and get back again. But time, you can't get it back. That 5 minutes that goes, it will never, ever, ever come back to you, no matter what you do, no matter what dua you make, no matter what thing you try to do. That 5 minutes will never, ever come back to you. It's gone, and it won't come back. So we want to maximize our time today. We want to get the most out of our day that we possibly can, inshallah ta'ala. We want to get the most out of this course. And with regard to this course, after I give you a sort of an introduction, I want you guys to realize that when we do a course like this, there's one thing I want to do and one thing that I don't want to do. What I want to do, or let me start with what I don't want to do. I don't want to repeat the same thing that I have on all of my YouTube videos, and I've done in Dubai once before, and I've done so many times in lots of different countries. I think at the end of the day, it's not worth giving up a day to hear me say the same thing that probably 95% of you have heard me say on YouTube before. So I don't want to do that. What I do want to do is to make today about you guys. Because what's the difference between coming to a course and between watching a video on YouTube? What's the benefit in you sitting here in front of me today, or me sitting here in front of you today? What's the benefit in that versus watching it at home on YouTube? I would hope the benefit in that is that today becomes about you guys. You guys control the topics, and you guys control the questions, and you guys get to ask about specifics. And I think this will become clear, insha'Allah ta'ala, after the introduction. Because I think that what we need to understand is, before we begin anything, what do we want to achieve out of today? What should you go home knowing? Or what should you go home having achieved? So I think to understand this, I'd like to give you a little bit of history as to myself. Now, I'm looking at most of you, and most of you, I know you, you've come to many of my lectures, and I've met you many, many times. Some new faces that I've never seen before, but the majority of people, I know you pretty well. But I'd like to give you a background as to where I have been in Ruqyah and where I have come to in Ruqyah today, and therefore where I am heading and how that impacts you and what I hoped you will achieve out of today, insha'Allah ta'ala. And I think this is an essential use of our time. I think it's absolutely essential that we start by taking stock. Because I could start by, okay, point number one is this. But I don't want to do that, because I feel that if we start with point number one is this, then maybe some people who are new to the courses or are new to my lectures might get a little bit lost off, might get a little bit confused, and might not get the most out of the day. But also I think that we all need to decide what we want out of today. Because, you know, like a lot of people come and, not a lot of, I mean, some people come and what they want is entertainment. You know, they want to pay their course fee and sit down and just be entertained. And just, you know, like, hear some wonderful story about something that will never ever happen to them, and they'll never ever have to involve themselves in it, and go home and sleep really soundly tonight. And that's not what I want you guys to achieve. This is dawratun ilmiya. It's a conference or a course that is knowledge-based. It's not entertainment-based. And I always say this to people, you know, that this topic is an interesting topic. And I don't begrudge you that, you know, it's an interesting topic. It's interesting. A lot of people want to know about it, but at the same time, it's not entertainment. It's not here just to make you guys feel really excited and then go to say, guess what he said, you know, the Ustad said that this happened, and how amazing is that? That's never going to happen to me. But for us to sort of become more practical than that and benefit more than that out of the course. At the same time, I'm not going to aim for it to be boring. I'm going to aim for it to be interesting, inshallah, but I'm not going to aim for it to be entertaining. I'm going to aim for it to be informative rather than entertaining. So where have I come from? Where am I now? Where am I going when it comes to Ruqyah? So I'm sure some of you will have heard me talk about how I started in Ruqyah, but I'll recap for everybody so that you all know how I started in this field. So I went to the Islamic University of Medina, and some of you might be surprised that they don't teach Ruqyah in the Islamic University of Medina. You don't get a course in any of the different departments, which is the Ruqyah course, where you go to learn how to perform Ruqyah, or you have some classes on Ruqyah, or some lectures on Ruqyah. I don't remember there ever being a topic on the jinn or on Ruqyah in Medina in the 7 years that I was there, inside of the university or outside of the university. I don't remember there being a single topic ever. And I might have missed one, but I don't personally remember there being a single topic on anything related to this. Of course, you kind of touch upon it in maybe Aqeedah, talking about the existence of the jinn, and that we don't worship the jinn or something like that, but it's not a focus of the university. But when I went there one summer, I came back to the UK, and I met up with a very, very close friend of mine, and he told me, again, it's hard to recall the details exactly, but I'll tell you as best as I remember. He told me that his sister had become very, very sick. And I think at this point he suspected that her sickness was not a natural sickness. It wasn't a sickness that was a medical sickness, and it wasn't a sickness that was what you would say is a natural sickness. It was something that he felt was out of the ordinary. She had got married, and immediately after getting married, she'd become very, very, very unwell very quickly, to the point that she was no longer able to live her married life. She was no longer able to sort of have any sort of good quality of life. She deteriorated very rapidly. She went from doctor to doctor, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. They came up with some ideas of what was wrong with her, and they tried some tests, and every time they were changing their mind, they were sending her from department to department, and she was getting worse and worse and worse. And as I remember, the brother said to me about this, that he suspected that it might not be natural, that it might be something to do with magic or the jinn. And did I know anything about it? And at this point, I had read a couple of books. I might have listened to a couple of lectures in English at that point, because, it's an interesting topic, and when it comes along, we all listen to it. So I think I listened to it in that way. I had read maybe a book or two. I had, maybe read those standard books you get in English. You get Ibn Taymiyyah's essay on the jinn, and, Bilal Phillips, on the exorcist tradition, and, these various different, kind of books that every bookstore has. I'd probably read a couple of them. But I didn't really know anything about it. And as I recall, I think I went back to Medina, and basically I went back with a bit of a mission to find out more on this topic. And I approached this topic with a very dear friend of mine, our Sheikh Abdul Basit Fahim, who has come here and given lectures to you, I believe, in the Urdu language. And he's a very, very close friend of mine. He's a very knowledgeable brother, and someone who I used to consider to be, and still do consider to be, a mentor for me. Somebody that I go to when I don't know what to do or I don't know what to read. He was the first person to buy books for me, to choose for me which books to buy, and to choose for me which halaqat, which lessons to sit in. So he's very much like a mentor figure. And I sat down with him and I said to him, this is the problem, and what do you advise me? And he said, I can't remember if I asked his advice or he told me while we were sitting, that his Sheikh Ali ibn Ghazi al-Tuwayjiri, hafidhahullah ta'ala, his Sheikh, who was doing his master's degree at that time, i.e. the Sheikh was his supervisor for his master's degree, had just written a book on Ruqyah. And that the Sheikh was very knowledgeable in Ruqyah. And I think at that point he mentioned it to me first, that he said to me, I'm doing my master's now, and my Sheikh is, he has an expertise in Ruqyah. He's just written this book, which is called Al-Istishfa bil-Quran al-Karim, seeking a cure from the noble Quran. And, you should go and see him. And I said, I've got this case that I've been presented in the UK, and I don't really know what to do about it. I'd love to go and see the Sheikh about this. And, I think at some point I ended up having to fix the Sheikh's laptop or something. Something happened in any case that brought us together, and I ended up sitting with Sheikh Ali, hafidhahullah, and asking the Sheikh to advise me what should be done. Should I recite on this sister or not? Should I learn Ruqyah? What needs to be done and how? And, I've summarized a lot of times what the Sheikh said to me. It stuck very, very strongly in my mind, that the Sheikh said something along the lines of, first of all, he warned me about having correct belief, and about the fact that if you're going to do Ruqyah, you've got to have the right belief. You've got to have the right approach towards Allah and towards the Quran, and your belief in the Quran, your belief in Allah has to be right. And I don't say strong, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't praise yourself. I don't say that you have to have strong iman, but you have to have the right foundation, the right principles, that you believe in Allah as Allah commanded you to do so. You believe, as the Prophet ﷺ said, you don't have any major errors in Aqeedah, you don't seek help from the dead, or you don't have any major bid'ah that you are openly doing, that you don't, that is wrong. And I mean, you basically have the basics, the foundations there. And he said to me, the second thing that you need, apart from being able to recite the Quran in a reasonable way, and again, I don't say, you don't have to be sort of, like Ali al-Hudayfi or something like that. You don't have to be an amazing reciter of the Quran, but you need to be able to recite the Quran competently. And without making any major errors, without pronouncing the dad as a dha, or without pronouncing the sin as a sheen, or without pronouncing the sad as a sin. You have to be able to, competently recite the Quran. And then he said to me one thing that stuck in my mind. He said to me, if you feel that you can be patient when everything around you is going, I don't know what the word is, it's falling apart, or, everything around you is something that you can't imagine, it's amazing or it's crazy. If you can be patient during that, and you see in yourself that you have the characteristic to be patient when everything is falling apart around you, then you should go and read on this sister. But I warn you from certain things. And one of the things he warned me about is the issue of reciting on a sister, the issue of not looking at her, not touching her, and other things that he said that there are a lot of people who do ruqyah and they make a lot of mistakes when it comes to non-mahram women. So sometimes their eyes, follow, and sometimes their hands follow their eyes, and so on and so forth. And he said there's no need for this, and it's not in accordance with the sunnah, and he warned me against certain kinds of mistakes and errors. And then he said to me, take my book and read my book, and you will find in there everything that you need, inshallah, and phone me if you have any problems. So I took his book, and I didn't read it all the way through. I read some basic parts, and I went over some other Ruqyah tapes, and I went to the UK, and I started doing Ruqyah. And I started doing Ruqyah for this one family. And I must have phoned the Sheikh every night, probably without fail, night after night after night. Sheikh, this happened, Sheikh, this happened, Sheikh, this happened. And after a while, I realized that his answer was always the same. His answer was always, remain patient, keep on doing what you're doing, don't lose your focus, don't let the shaitan panic you, look at yourself, come close to Allah, repent, recite, don't worry about it, just keep on going. And I probably find myself saying that all the time to people now, but that really was my beginning in Ruqyah. And that in some ways that case really troubles me, because it didn't really get resolved. It didn't really come to the conclusion that I was hoping it would. قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. But it began my interest in the topic, and it began me looking into Ruqyah in more detail, and sort of having more knowledge about it, and starting to sort of seek out scholars or people of knowledge in this field, and start to build my knowledge in this. And always the person I was closest to is Sheikh Ali, Hafidhahullah, because I found that Sheikh Ali's approach was so different to the approach that I had seen from so many people. He is so strict on the sunnah. Wallahi, I can honestly say, as a person doing Ruqyah, he is one of the strictest people that I've seen in terms of adherence to the sunnah, and not messing around, and not doing some weird and wonderful things, and not like doing these things where there is some ikhtilaf about it, and maybe you can, maybe you can't, or not doing these doubtful matters, and just sticking to the proper sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So that was a massive influence on me. He also warned me that a lot of people who do Ruqyah don't really know what they're doing. And I don't think he said it in those words, but I took it that way, and I myself have sort of realized since then that the majority of people who do Ruqyah don't know what they're doing. And that's not an exaggeration. Like, the majority of people who claim some area of expertise in this field, and often they claim a crazy area of expertise. I have this ilm that nobody else has except me, and I can teach you the secrets of this topic, and I can teach you the hidden gems. And in reality, what you see is just a whole load of bid'ah, a whole load of innovation, and some misconceptions, and bad aqeedah, and a lack of knowledge, and a lack of following the sunnah. And then they say, my way is better than the way of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of the first things that Sheikh Ali sort of drove into my mind is that the best way to do Ruqyah is the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions radiallahu anhum did Ruqyah. This is the way you do Ruqyah. As for Ruqyah with all of these, like these ulum and this study of this and that and the other, and these, weird and wonderful herbs and medicines and whatever, and some of it is of a benefit. But a lot of it is just taking you away from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I know not all of the brothers agree with me on this. Not all of the brothers who do Ruqyah agree with me on this, and I'm sure people will see the video and give me some, hard time for saying this. They will say, no, many of our scholars approved of these ways and these means and these secret passages and whatever. But I'm fairly convinced in what I say. Not only because it matches the principles of the sunnah is always best, but more than that, sort of 10 years plus of practical experience has shown me that the people who do it according to the sunnah are consistently and regularly more successful, and they get the job done in a shorter amount of time than those people who use all of these weird and wonderful ways and classifications and knowledge and these weird books and ideas and herbs and medicines and whatever. The people who just do it according to the sunnah just get the job done quicker. And this is my experience over many, many, many people doing Ruqyah over more than 10 years of learning and teaching Ruqyah, that the sunnah is just better in every single way. And that doesn't mean these little side forms of knowledge are not beneficial. You can take a benefit from certain herbs, certain herbal medicines we're going to talk about today, certain sort of supporting actions, certain types of knowledge, classification of the jinn. I'm not saying that's irrelevant, but it literally represents 1%, 2% of the knowledge of Ruqyah. 98, 99% is knowing the sunnah and implementing the sunnah. And that's something that I took from our Sheikh Ali At-Tuwajiri, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. So I started doing Ruqyah, I started reading about Ruqyah, and my next step along the line, and I want to talk you through the videos as well, because I want you to kind of understand all of these videos of Muhammad Tim on magic are just like all in one big lump. There's no chronology. You don't know which one came first and which one came second. So probably the first time was, there was a masjid in Birmingham in the United Kingdom, and this masjid, Green Lane Masjid, they invited me and they said to me, we'd like you to do a talk on the jinn or a talk on Ruqyah. Actually before that, I think I did one in Newcastle, and it was quite a low-key thing. And then after that, I did one on the jinn and Ruqyah, probably because there was a student in that masjid who studied with me in Medina, and he knew that I was kind of interested in the topic. So he asked me to talk about just the jinn, I think just the world of the jinn. So I did a talk on the world of the jinn. It was very simplistic. It was very, very simple now. Maybe some areas I think that I don't always agree with now that I watch it again. I keep meaning to make an edited version, like a director's cut or something, where I basically edit the video. But this was one of my first videos that I did. Certainly it was one of my first videos on YouTube on the topic of magic and the jinn. And what happened was they had scheduled another speaker to come the next week and talk about magic, and that speaker couldn't come. So they phoned me and said, would you be interested in coming and talking about magic? Following on from what you talked about the jinn. And would you particularly be interested in, speaking a little bit about this Aleister Crowley and this Abrahadabra or Abracadabra, this statement of shirk that he used to make, that he used to say, and it's Hebrew, but it actually is very near to Arabic. Abrah in Hebrew is the same as abra'u in Arabic. I create. Hadabra, as I wish. Yani, akhluqu ma asha. This is the meaning of abracadabra, something like the equivalent of saying in Arabic, akhluqu ma asha. I create whatever I want. And this is, of course, a statement of shirk, and a statement which takes a person outside of Islam, competing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Khaliq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. And so you see, anyways, I started studying some of these magicians, and that got me interested more in how people do magic. Because I had kind of touched on that in some of the books, but this really got me interested in that. And then I went on, and I guess the next stage was the Ruqyah Workshop that I did with Abu Ibrahim. And in this time I was doing a lot of Ruqyah. I was doing a lot of Ruqyah, a lot of cases, and I was doing Ruqyah like the standard classical way, meaning that I bring the family in, or I go visit the family 3 times a week, or they come visit me 3 times a week, or once a week, or twice a week, and I read on them and I send them home. And I probably tell them, read Al-Falaq and An-Nas over yourself, but there was no emphasis on self-ruqyah. It was very much like, I'm a Raqi, come to me, I read on you, you go home. Come to me again, I read on you, you go home. I come to you, I read on you, I go home. And that was the kind of way that I was doing things. That was how I was taking care of my Ruqyah. And at that point, I think I found my Ruqyah partner, Basak. He's now studying in the Islamic University of Medina. He won't thank me for mentioning his name. But anyways, I'll mention it again. Our brother Basak, who is my Ruqyah partner, in the sense that me and him, we met each other. I think he came to one of my Arabic classes, and he became my Ruqyah partner. And it's a nice time to talk about what makes a good Raqi or a good Ruqyah partner. One thing is, you could light a fire under his feet and he wouldn't move. And that is a very, very good characteristic to have in someone that does Ruqyah. To be very, very patient, to be very, very mentally strong. Physical strength has almost no relation to ruqyah at all. I mean, we're going to talk about violent jinn later on, but physical strength is almost worthless. I mean, a little bit of physical strength is good, but it's not of any great benefit. But mental strength is extremely important. If you're a person who, when the lights turn off, you run out of the room, that is not a good situation to start doing ruqyah in. You know, you need to be a person who is mentally very sort of unshakable. And again, I say that word in a very generic sense because all of us get scared. I've had times in ruqyah sessions where I've got scared and my heart started racing. You know, at the end of the day, you're dealing with things you can't see, attacking you from every direction. You know, you would not be an ordinary human being if you didn't get scared from time to time. But the general sort of like reaction should be that this person is solid as a rock and patient. And the other thing that I really benefit from this brother being my ruqyah partner is that he is extremely strict on inkar al-munkar, on forbidding the munkar. And wallahi, I say this without, wallahu hasibuhu wa la uzakki ala Allahi ahada. Allah knows him best, and I don't claim anyone is pious in the sight of Allah. I don't claim to have knowledge that Allah doesn't have. But one thing I saw from him is he is better than me at forbidding evil. You know, if a sister would come without hijab, I would kind of say, sister, next time you need to put your hijab, it's not good you come without hijab. He would say, don't come in through the door. Go home, put your hijab, come back. And he was stricter than me in that sense. And it was really good for me because if I ever felt like doing anything that wasn't right, he would slap me down straight away. He would literally just say, that's not right, stop it, ittaqullah, or ittaqillah. He would say, fear Allah. So that kind of relationship, having this ruqyah partner, that's what you want. You want someone you can depend on. So when everything starts flying in the room, they are, firmly feet on the ground. You want someone that is going to be sort of helping you to do the right thing. We always, sometimes, like we're going to talk later about touching people in ruqyah, and I said, I'm totally against touching women in ruqyah, but sometimes it happens. Sometimes, the woman throws you a punch, and you decide that, you need to grab hold of her arm, because if you don't, you're going to, end up with a black eye. So you do, and then every time that would happen, I would sit with him, and I would say to him, did we do the right thing? Was it, did I rush too quickly? Did I, take hold of her arm when I didn't need to? Should I just have moved back? And we would review it. And we would develop sort of a procedure or a system whereby we would kind of review something that was, maybe not right. Did I end up, was I not lowering my gaze? Was I not, reading in the right way? Did I get distracted and stop reading Al-Falaq and An-Nas and start reading Surah Al-Safat or something like that? Did I lose my focus? Did I get angry with the jinn and start, raising my voice too much and getting too emotional? Did I engage in conversation too much? And we would kind of act as a sounding board to each other and say, next time I don't think we should do that. Next time I think we should do this. And also what we would do is take over from one another. So this is something that's really useful for having a ruqyah partner is when you try and do it on your own, you have to handle all of that recitation, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, by yourself. And having someone there with you means when your throat gets tired, when you start feeling, they can take over, and it's like a relay, you're passing the baton to one another. So this is what I was doing when I started. I met Abu Ibrahim, and Abu Ibrahim had a lot of experience of ruqyah from various places, various shuyukh and stuff, and we kind of hit it off because of that. We kind of, because of the ruqyah side of things, we sort of became friends, and I ended up doing a ruqyah course with Abu Ibrahim. But you have to also remember that this ruqyah course with Abu Ibrahim was still one of the earlier ruqyah courses that I did. In fact, it was the first full-time, proper course that I did on ruqyah. I don't remember doing I remember doing lectures, but I don't remember doing a proper ruqyah course before Abu Ibrahim. And that course was amazing because wherever I fell short, he made up for it. And it was really, really good. And it's still what I say is my go-to course. It's still the one that I tell everybody to watch. But what you need to understand about that is that that course was still, I had not fully made that transition to self-ruqyah. I was still Iraqi, as in a traditional, come to me and I'll read over you type of Raqi. And at the same time, also, we were just still learning, and we're still learning today. But we were still, forming ideas, and we were still sort of, trying to gather everything together and trying to present it, in 2 days was very short. 2 days is a very short length of time to go over, everything. But it was good, and I still consider that course to be one of my go-to courses that I tell everybody, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch this 10-part Ruqyah course. It's on my website, on the video page, this 10-part Ruqyah course, and it was still an important course. After that, what happened is that course was well received, alhamdulillah, a lot of people benefited from it, and what we did is, it kind of made a lot of people ask for other courses. So one that I did was in South Africa, but one that I did is available on YouTube, and it's available on YouTube from the West London Islamic Cultural Centre. From the West London Islamic Cultural Centre. And it's shorter than the one that I did with Abu Ibrahim. But the difference is that there's some areas in there that I corrected that I haven't corrected, that I hadn't corrected before. And Basak makes an appearance in it as well. So Basak turns up because what happened was during the course, somebody had a very severe reaction, and we decided, for better or for worse, that we would do Ruqyah on the stage. So we brought the brother to the stage. The brother was not attending the course, he was attending the masjid. And we brought him on the stage, and we did Ruqyah for the brother on the stage. That did not go down very well with the audience, because you all think that would be amazing, but half of the women were about to faint, and people left. I mean, people left and went home. That was how it went. People left and went home and sent me horrible emails saying, how dare you expose me to this? This was the worst experience, and it was horrible. And Brother Basak has an advice that he made for them on the day, where he took the mic and basically just said, we're not here to entertain you. Welcome to the real world. This is what Ruqyah is really like. It's not a 10-second, YouTube video where you see something floating and you think, oh, that's really entertaining. It's something where people die and people suffer from long-term illnesses, and people have their whole lives ruined, and you have to deal with that. And so it's not fun, and it's not entertaining. It's probably, it's just, I can't find even another profession that matches it. It's like being a doctor in emergency medicine and a psychologist at the same time. You're dealing with people who are in emergency situations, whose lives have been ruined, who have major psychological issues, and I'm not talking about them not coming from the jinn, I mean from the jinn, but the jinn have caused within them major psychological issues, major problems, and they are suffering so badly that, on a worst case scenario, they could die. And, people do. And I had an email just the other day from someone saying that, basically blaming me for not treating their, cousin or whatever who died. And subhanAllah, at the end of the day, it's a serious thing. So basically, we did the Ruqyah session, and instead of having this wonderful, elated, reaction from the audience of, wow, we saw a Ruqyah session and we heard the jinn speak, the basic reaction was just like this. And most people, some people were shaking, some people, I think, threw up outside, some people left and went home, some people sent me nasty emails, and still, a lot of people stayed. But, at the end of the day, it didn't go down great. And I kind of learned my lesson from that. And I've learned, that I get it in the neck no matter what I do, right? If I do it, I get in trouble. If I don't do it, I get in trouble. So at Kalemah, last event, in the last Ruqyah workshop, somebody had a reaction, and believe it or not, I started getting complaints. Why did Muhammad Tim leave the sister to have the reaction and not go down from the stage and just start doing Ruqyah in front of everyone? But like I said, I'm in trouble if I do it, and I'm in trouble if I don't. But I've kind of learnt my lesson that actually ruqyah in front of an audience doesn't really benefit a lot. And the person is not going to get like an instant cure in most cases. And the better thing is to see them after the course, treat them after the course in private, and take that whole situation and keep that whole situation separate. At this point, one of the things that I became really interested in was I became really interested in the ethics of ruqyah. And I've always been interested in the ethics of ruqyah, right from Sheikh Ali, Hafidhahullah, which is things like, not videotaping your ruqyah session. Because I see some people, there are some very well-known Raqis, friends of mine, well, acquaintances of mine at least, who, video everything, slap it on YouTube, get loads of followers, hey, it's all amazing. But that's would you have a psychologist or a psychiatrist have a patient come in, spill their heart out about all of their fears and worries, video it on YouTube, and then post it to get views? Like, that person would not remain in the profession or in their hospital for very long. I can promise you that. And I think this affected me when I did a talk on medical ethics. I did a talk on medical ethics in Islam. And it just made me think, that at the end of the day, a lot of the ruqyah is very unregulated, as you know. Like, anybody can put a hat on and say, hey, I'm Iraqi, Like, it's very, very unregulated, and it's very, very haphazard. But one of the sad things we see good brothers who do good ruqyah with bad ethics. So they're good brothers, they do good ruqyah in the sense they're upon the sunnah, but they have bad ethical standards. So they tell everybody about what goes on, they put it on YouTube, they touch people when they shouldn't, they just generally, don't behave in the patient's best interest. They behave in the best interest of themselves and promoting themselves and what have you. And that's very sad. So I started to get into that. I started to write about it, to talk about it, and I put some things on the blog post on various topics. And at this point, I got a chance to meet my kind of second big influence in terms of a sheikh for ruqyah, and that was our Sheikh Adil bin Tahir al-Muqbil, Hafidhahullah ta'ala. Sheikh Adil is just a law unto himself. He is just, Sheikh Adil, how do I describe Sheikh Adil? I don't think I can describe him. You just have to watch him. He's just, I can't bring words to describe him. He has worked most of his life in the Hay'at al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf wa Nahy al-Munkar, the committee of the promotion of virtue and the prevention of vice in Saudi Arabia, with the specialization of catching and bringing magicians to justice. That is just my ideal job, that is just so amazing. This guy basically gets to, this Sheikh Hafidhahullah, he drives around all day catching magicians and bringing them to justice. He's not a Raqi. He doesn't do ruqyah for people as such. But what he does do is he gives a lot of advice. He is absolutely one of the strictest people I've ever seen in explaining the role of tawheed in successful ruqyah, the role of aqeedah in successful ruqyah. When you ask him about ruqyah, he's just going to give you kitab al-tawheed. Honestly, if you ask him about ruqyah, he will literally just sit with kitab al-tawheed and take you through 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what you should believe about Allah. And you'll say to him at the end, Sheikh, but I asked you about ruqyah. And he will say, this is ruqyah. Yani this is what you need. Your belief in Allah, your belief in the oneness of Allah, your tawheed, you're worshipping Allah alone, you're being far away from shirk. This is what you need. This is the reason people are not successful in ruqyah. And that amazed me. But just the depth of his knowledge on the topic of magic is just unbelievable. This person, I think, and I've seen him personally, speak to a magician or someone who practices magic and educate the magician. The magician is left going, I didn't know that. And this guy has such a breadth, a depth of knowledge about magic. He is literally a bahar, like they say in Arabic. He's a sea of knowledge when it comes to magic and how magic works and the reality of it and the reality of the magician. And I was blessed to be able to attend his course, his 2-day course in London. and I became very close to the Sheikh. He became, someone I was very close to. And until this day, I message him and he gives me advice about ruqyah, about magic, about magicians. But one of the things that really, or two or three things that really changed me as a person when I met him, one was the emphasis on belief. Because literally, if he teaches you ruqyah, 9 hours of it will be aqeedah and 1 hour of it will be ruqyah. And that is the right way of doing things. And that's the way the Prophet ﷺ did things. 10 years in Makkah teaching people La ilaha illallah, then the salah, then the ahkam of Islam. That is how the Prophet ﷺ did things, and that is how we do things. All of our time we spend aqeedah, tawheed, tawheed, sunnah. Get your prayer right. And trust me, the bit you need to learn about ruqyah is like this. It's nothing, it's tiny. Compared to correcting your belief, getting on the sunnah, getting your prayers right, and your major obligations right, and avoiding your major sins. I think if a person gets to there, wallah, if they only read قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ, they would find a cure in it, inshallah. Wallahi, this is not me saying this out of, just as a statement to get you all like, wow, this is what I really believe. You correct your aqeedah. You correct your adherence to the sunnah. You correct your prayer. You correct your obligations and avoid your major sins. And wallahi, you read قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ, you will find it kafi and shafi'an. You will find it enough for you in every regard. Because the reality is, this is the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. Aqeedah awwalan, al-aqeedatu awwalan. Aqeedah comes first. Belief comes first. Attaching your heart to Allah comes first. Turning to Allah comes first. The salah comes after that. And then the obligations and avoiding the prohibitions. The most important, like they say, al-aham fal-muhim, or al-aham fal-aham. The important one, and then the next important one, and then the next important one, and then the next important one. And then ruqyah, you'll find, will become a lot more successful and a lot more powerful and a lot easier than it was before. So that's one thing that I benefited massively from the Shaykh. The second thing that I benefited massively from the Shaykh and really changed me is the Shaykh's emphasis on self-ruqyah. And his emphasis on you getting the patient to turn to Allah first of all. And this was kind of the beginning, and at the beginning I kind of thought, that's excellent. I can read on people and tell them to read at home, and then read on them and tell them to read at home. And as I've tested that over the years, and I've tested it over several years now, I've kind of realized that the reading they do at home is even better than the reading that I'm doing for them. And that in reality, the reading that I'm doing for them is not as good as the reading they're doing for themselves at home. And there's a lot of reasons we're going to talk about today, inshallah, regarding that. One of them is you're instantly, from an iman perspective, you're much closer to Allah when it's only you and Allah. Right? We all know the hadith of the 70,000 who will enter Jannah بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ وَلَا عَذَابٍ, and the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, هُمُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَسْتَرْقُونَ. They are the ones who do not seek ruqyah. And as we've said before, seeking ruqyah may be wajib, may be fard upon you. If you can't pray, if you can't fulfill your obligations, if you can't be a Muslim without going to a raqi for ruqyah, then it is fardu ayn upon you to go to a raqi for ruqyah. But if you are able to handle it yourself, handle it yourself. If you're able to put the only thing, this relationship is directly between you and Allah, the benefit of iman and the success that iman brings to your ruqyah will be so many times multiplied that you'll actually find that it's more efficient and it's better for you than you going to a person to do ruqyah for you, regardless of the knowledge they have. And I still believe we should have people who do ruqyah. I'm not against that. But I just started to turn the balance, or to weigh my balance onto self-ruqyah. And another thing that made me do that is more and more people were finding out about me. More and more people were learning about me from YouTube videos and whatever. And so the number of people who were contacting me became more than I could ever hope to do. You know, if I cloned myself 10 times, I could not handle the number of people who came to me asking me for ruqyah and help. And so you start to realize that, hey, we're dealing with an epidemic here, or a pandemic. We're dealing with an illness that is spread all over the world to hundreds and thousands and perhaps even millions of people. You can't have one Muhammad Tim treating 10 million people. You can't have 100 Muhammad Tims treating 10 million people. You can't have 1 million Muhammad Tims treating 10 million people. You roughly maybe you can handle, I don't know, 5 patients at a time, something like that. So the reality is, it isn't possible to rely upon a group of people of 20 or 50 or 100 or whatever. You just can't rely upon them to do the ruqyah that's needed. What we need them to do is, like we've said, and I mentioned this in the Kalemah lesson, which I'll come to, is this concept of a hospital. In a hospital, you have patients, you have pharmacists, you have nurses, you have junior doctors and trainees, and you have from the trainee, the junior doctor, from the junior doctor to the more senior doctor, to the senior, to the consultant, to the specialist, and and you have like a pyramid diagram. The same thing we need in ruqyah. If everyone went to the hospital every time they had a headache, what would happen? The hospital would be overwhelmed. So what do? We teach people to do ruqyah on themselves and self-treat. Those people who are really successful at self-treating, they become like sort of the pharmacist, right? You know, like your next port of call. I'm a little bit ill, but I'm not ill enough to go to the doctor. Let me go to the pharmacist and say, you know, I do have a little bit of this pain. What should I do? And they say, well, just take this medicine. I don't need to see you. I don't need to look at you or anything. Just take this medicine. Then you get up to the next level, and you have people who are kind of like junior doctors, and they sort of, you know, see a few people and around them, and they're giving some ruqyah and some help, but it's not like really specialized until you get to the very top of the tree, and you have, you know, some of the most knowledgeable people in the world in ruqyah, like the shuyukh who I, you know, learn from and I go to when I get stuck. Those are the people who are at the very top of the tree. They don't need to be doing ruqyah on people day to day. They need to be helping the people who couldn't self-treat, who couldn't go to the pharmacy, who couldn't go to the junior doctor or the GP, who needed someone more senior, and then later on maybe even they go to someone more senior than them and more knowledgeable than them on a very specific case that we couldn't crack. So this kind of model works. It works around the world. It works in healthcare around the world, that you don't have everyone who has a headache go to the consultant of neurology and have him look at, you know, give them one of these CT scans and analyze their brain patterns. You know, you just go and take a paracetamol. And that's the system that we need to have for ruqyah. We need to have self-ruqyah, people who are good at self-ruqyah, you know, like occasional ruqyah, detailed ruqyah, all of these within self-ruqyah, then, you know, email advice, personal advice, the occasional meeting, the odd consultation, and then right at the top of the tree, these people who are world-renowned experts who are giving us very specific and very, very detailed advice with regard to ruqyah and with regard to specific issues within the field of ruqyah. So this is what I started to realize, that at the moment in ruqyah, in most places in the world, we are operating the principle that if you have a headache, you need to go and see a neurologist and have a CT scan. That is how we are basically operating the ruqyah in the world today. Everyone who has a twitch in their ear gets to see the most knowledgeable raqi in the country, and they do ruqyah on them. And it's absolutely unsustainable. It cannot work. It just cannot work. It works better in some places than others. Some people have done a better system. They have some trainees, they have some students, but ultimately it cannot work. So at this point, I started to change my view on ruqyah and become a lot more focused on teaching people, and a lot more focused on helping people to help themselves with the help of Allah. And that's kind of my mission, really, you know, helping people to help themselves with the help of Allah. And I still see people from time to time, and I'm quite happy to do ruqyah on people, but I would like to do ruqyah on people who have done the following. Number one, They have learnt Ruqyah for themselves. This is step number one. They've watched the videos, they've been through the website. My number one pet hate, and it is a hate, is somebody saying, brother, I'm sick, can you do Ruqyah for me? First of all, you need to learn Ruqyah, learn what it is, learn what you can do. If you've never tried to read on yourself, why go to somebody? What kind of, you're lowering your iman, you're breaking your relationship with Allah, and you're just making difficulty for other people who are more serious. And my other pet hate, and it's even worse than the first one, are people who think their case is the most urgent. I can promise you anybody who emails me with the word urgent gets their email put to the back of the list. Because it's just horrible manners, and it's absolute selfishness to believe that your case is worse than someone who, and I'll be honest, I get cases like, the doctor has told me I've got a week left to live. And then someone says, my case is really urgent, my leg doesn't stop twitching. And you want to say, sometimes you get angry, you want to say, may Allah cut off your leg. And how dare you presume that your case is more serious than those people? And you don't have such bad manners. And people email me and get angry with me. I emailed you, you didn't respond in 3 days. Don't you care? That's the kind of emails that I get. Don't you care? You killed my cousin. I'm serious. Apart from the jinn are constantly, I once came across a brother in the masjid, he fainted in the masjid and he said, you killed my cousin. The jinn said to me, you killed my cousin. And that's a different story. But I get people emailing me, so you killed my cousin. And I'm like, I don't remember doing that, Habibi. You want to explain to me? And he's like, well, I emailed you and I told you that it was serious and I told you it was urgent and you didn't respond within 3 days and he died. I say, غَفَرَ اللَّهُ لَهُ. But what do you want me to do? If it's an emergency, call 911. And I'm not an emergency ambulance. I don't have blue flashing lights on my car that when you email me, yalla, put the blue lights on, off I go. To the end, I'll go to the end of the world, jump on the plane, private jet, straight there, land there, fi sabilillah, turn up at your doorstep, do emergency ruqyah. That's not realistic. That email comes from someone who has not connected with Allah, who does not believe that Allah is your emergency, number that you call when you're in desperate need, is you call upon Allah. You call upon Allah, or if it's a real desperate need, you call upon the people around you who you can, physically reach and touch. But to send an email to someone halfway around the world and say that, you really should have done this for me, it's really selfish. It's just not good manners. So I'm really strict on this. But, my sort of perspective is, number one, learn. Develop your knowledge. Because what's the point in me emailing you the same thing I said in my video? What's the point in me today saying to you guys the same thing that you can watch on YouTube? So why come and sit here, come and sit because it's something, it's different to what you're going to see on YouTube, So that's the first thing, learn. The second thing is, try the basic treatments mentioned. I have my 7-day treatment, I mentioned it in the Kalemah workshop, I have a basic Ruqyah program. Give it a go yourself, and I love it when people email and say, I've watched your videos, I've tried this treatment, and this has happened. I don't like it when they say, I've watched your videos, tried the treatment, help me, because that's not specific enough. I like it when they say, I've watched your videos, I've tried the treatment, I improved, but I have XYZ problem that's not going away. That for me is massively worthwhile. It's worthwhile a blog post, because probably that's a deficiency in my treatment, and it's maybe even something that other people need to know about. So I'll even, I'll spend an afternoon, I'll spend 4 hours to write a blog post on that topic, because I see that person is genuinely trying. And they've tried, and they are asking me a specific question about a specific problem, and not just this, will you help me? And will you help me is likely to get a reply of, please visit the website. And that's the purpose. At the end of the day, you can't say the same thing to that many people. You have to kind of make it a broad thing. So I'm still continuing on my history of Ruqyah. I really want you to understand where I came from and why we're here today. So the next thing was the Kalemah. And I did a few in between. I went to South Africa, I did one. But the Kalemah first Ruqyah workshop, of which this is workshop number 2. And this is the first time that I really pushed self-ruqyah. And I entitled it Successful Self-Ruqyah. So I think that if you're watching the videos in order, definitely watch the Abu Ibrahim set, try and watch the West London Islamic Center set, and then watch Successful Self-Ruqyah and Overcoming Problems in Ruqyah, which is what we did last time. And that was all about encouraging people to do ruqyah on themselves. And I talked them through the treatment, because I understand it's not nice to give someone a blog post article, maybe they don't understand, there's some confusion. So I talked you through the treatment. I literally made a video, and I think it was live uploaded to YouTube, and I think there's a better version that's going to come out, inshallah, that's on DVD or whatever, but this version on YouTube is a bit broken, but I mean, it's there. It was there from the first day of me talking you through how to do the treatment. This is what you do first, this is what you do second, this is what you do third, this is some of the reasons why treatment doesn't work. You know, and I always tell people this, the role of sin in stopping your treatment. Sin is the major reason. I mean, you know the famous statement, statement, everybody's heard it. ما نزلت مصيبة إلا بذنب وما رفعت إلا بتوبة. No musibah, no calamity ever befell anyone except because of sin, and it was never raised from anyone except because of tawbah. And I also talked about how do you know your treatment is complete, how do you know when the jinn is gone, how do you deal with these things, and all of that stuff. So that was really for me, you know, that for me was sort of me trying to explain to people why I'm telling people to do self-ruqyah and why I think self-ruqyah is the best. And it's not to free my time up. Really, genuinely, I believe that self-ruqyah is the only viable solution to the problem of magic in the world today, is to have, you know, 100 million Muslims doing self-ruqyah. That's the only viable solution to magic. And that's the only way that I see that we can get this problem under control, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, along with correcting, obviously, the people's belief. And then, you know, in terms of that, like talking about, you know, how people, you know, the other reason why I think self-ruqyah is so important, not just that I think it's the only option, but in my, and I keep saying 10 years, and it's been more than 10 years now, I keep forgetting, 2006 maybe, yeah, maybe 10 years, let's say 10 years. 10 years of doing ruqyah, I've honestly found that the people who do self-ruqyah consistently and regularly across a wide spectrum of problems and cases get better more quickly, and they have a longer lasting recovery, less complications, and overall they just have a better experience from their ruqyah. So as I said, I think you see it as a pyramid. We start people off with simple self-ruqyah. Hey, I've got a headache. I don't know if I have a problem. Should I consider myself to have a problem? You know, simple 7-day treatment that I talked you through last time. You know, just a simple, you know, olive oil and water and whatever. Am I, you know, do I have a problem or not? Okay, what's the next step? I have a problem and I don't know what to do about it. I have a problem, I have a problem, okay, move up to the full Ruqyah program. It's on the website, it's on the homepage, Muhammad Tim's full Ruqyah program, move up to that. And you know, subhanAllah, one of the things I also wanted to share with you at this point is, I'm always very suspicious of people who tell me that they do my full Ruqyah program. And I'll tell you why. I've tried doing my full Ruqyah program, and I could not do it for more than 3 days. Myself, I'll be honest with you. I could not keep up that program for more than 3 days in a row. So I'm always very suspicious with people who send me an email that I've done your Ruqyah program for 3 months without fail, and I haven't got any better. I'm not saying they're lying. Of course, we have husn al-dhan, we think good of you. But I think that you should look at yourself and ask yourself, did I really stick to the program? Because wallahi, I can't stick to it for more than 3 days. I've never beat 3 days in a row of doing what I recommend on my website. Because, it's an awful lot of time. 45 minutes of ruqyah a day, plus a third of Surah Al-Baqarah, plus the water and the olive oil and the showering and the black seed, plus hijama, plus. I've never managed to do it for more than 3 days in a row. And that's why I think that a lot of people are still looking for an easy answer. People are not doing the program. They're not doing what they've been told. They're looking for a quick and easy answer. I've done your program, it didn't work, give me something quicker. And the reality is most people haven't done it. Now I'm not saying everybody. I know some of my patients who do it strictly, and I know they do it strictly. I see them doing it day after day after day, and I know these people are like, mashallah, tabarakallah, you know, if you can give 1.5 hours to ruqyah a day, every day, week after week, that shaitan must be getting absolutely tortured. Because, you know, it's amazing. And you know, some people have another problem, is that they're doing the time, but they're not doing it with their heart. Remember this tip, it will help you a whole lot. Dhikr is with the tongue and the heart and the limbs. Dhikr, this is an absolute fundamental principle in ruqyah. Dhikr is with the tongue and the heart and the limbs. Too many people who do ruqyah with the tongue. The heart is empty. People who do ruqyah as a profession, and people who do ruqyah on themselves. So you see them like this. Alhamdulillah, they tell me, I finished Surah Al-Baqarah in half an hour. I'm like, I can't finish Surah Al-Baqarah in 2 hours, and I don't read very slowly. You know, like, even if you take someone, you know, a regular reciter of the Quran, I don't think you'll find any reciter of the Quran on a tape finishing Surah Al-Baqarah in less than, let's say, 1.5 hours or 1 hour and 20 minutes, something like that. I don't think you'll find it. And you know, subhanAllah, if you're reading the Quran with that attention and that focus and that, you know, turning to Allah, and your heart is literally stopping at every ayah and thinking and believing and reflecting, your ruqyah is going to become many, many times more effective than it is if your tongue is just moving. The shaitan get hurt if your tongue is just moving. The shaitan get burned. But when they really get tortured is when your heart is engaged. You know, when you read إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, if you get chance, and maybe I'll try and translate it, it has been translated before, listen to what Ibn al-Qayyim said about إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Ibn al-Qayyim said that he treated himself from pretty much every illness that he had ever experienced in this length of time in Mecca, only with إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Nothing else. Or with Surah Al-Fatiha, focusing his attention and his energy and his thoughts upon إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. And that's enough. Wallahi, it is enough as a ruqyah. It's enough. Wallah, enough. Subhanallah. You know, what does this ayah contain from tawheed and turning to Allah and relying upon Allah and showing your poverty in front of Allah? It's just, you know, you can't describe how much this ayah contains of benefit, but so many of us just skip over it. It's just in robot mode. You know, even if we're reciting the Quran slowly, the heart is not there. The heart needs to be there. And, you know, sometimes I'll even change the surah I read because I want my heart to attach. I'm not attaching to that surah. I'm just like reading it, and I'll swap and I'll just change. And I'll read something like Surah Al-Anbiya because I just want my mind to focus back on the Quran. And you know, it can be repetitive. You know, you're reading the same thing over and over again. Sometimes you just switch to a different surah from time to time just to get your heart. Sometimes I read in a different qira'ah. I read in Warsh, or I read in Khalaf and Hamza. Not that I'm very good at it, but you know, I just to get myself to change and my heart to just attach again. And then the third thing, you know, after, you know, in terms of the tongue and the heart, is the limbs. And this is where a lot of people also go wrong in ruqyah. Their heart is really feeling it, their tongue is really feeling it, they're pronouncing it, they're saying it slowly, the heart is engaged, but then they go out and they do the opposite of what they just read. And their limbs are not giving truth. Their limbs are not giving truth to what they read. They read, you know, for example, something about a sin or something about avoiding, or Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum. And then they go out and they leave their taqwa at the door. And at the end of the day, that ruqyah is not going to have the same effect. It can't have the same effect. Because when dhikr, you know, when you talk about flow and being like in the flow of things, you know, dhikr, you're in the flow of dhikr when your tongue and your heart and your limbs are all together working on the same thing. Your limbs are giving truth to it, your tongue is giving truth to it, your heart is attached to it. That is when your ruqyah makes a difference. That is when your ruqyah starts to have a massive impact. And I see that in myself. Sometimes when I'm a bit distracted, I see that my ruqyah is less effective than when I'm really concentrating. Even in one person, you'll see it. And I know that if you have an affliction, the shaitan will distract you and take your heart away, but it's all in the effort. And that's another point that I want to make to you guys, and I want to, sort of drill home or hammer home to you guys, is that it's all in the effort. It doesn't matter that the shaitan takes your mind away and you start, what was I reading? Doesn't matter. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. No problem. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان. It's the effort of going back and pushing yourself. That's what hurts the shaitan. So that is kind of what I was talking about in my self-ruqyah course. And then, sort of, what am I doing at Kalemah with ruqyah right now? I don't do ruqyah in Dubai with Kalemah because I have so many other things to do, da'wah and work with new Muslims and non-Muslims and lectures. But I kind of try to advise people by email, and I try to sometimes, meet people on the way in, on the way out, and give people a little bit of, general advice as to their case, inshaAllah ta'ala. So this brings us to this next point. Where do we go from here? Why are we here today? That's where we've been. That's kind of a super fast recap of what we've done. And if you missed any of that because you haven't watched the videos, you can go back tonight or tomorrow or the next day or whatever, and you can watch those videos all the way through, inshallah, and you'll get up to where we are now. If you watch Abu Ibrahim video plus the West London Islamic Center one, if you like, optionally, plus the Kalemah workshop, successful self-ruqyah and overcoming problems in ruqyah, and then you end up sort of, there's one more video that I want you to watch as well, the Quran as a cure. I summarized Sheikh Ali's book, Al-Istishfa bil-Quran al-Kareem, in a video called The Quran as a Cure, and it's also on my website, muhammadtim.com/video. It's on there as well. It's called The Quran as a Cure. That's also very important as well. That's generically talking about how you actually go through the process of ruqyah. How do you read, and what do you read, and when and how, and stuff like that. So that takes us up to here. What I want to do today is I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't want someone to go out and say, well, that's the same thing I've heard him say before. What I want to do today is basically, if I look at it, is basically 3 or 4 things. The first thing I've done, and that is to recap where we are now. The second thing that I would like to do is to start talking about specific ruqyah problems. So maybe people who have financial problems, people who have problems having children, people who have problems in their marriage, and start looking at how to tweak ruqyah to make it more effective in particular instances. And I often, have a go at those people who teach ruqyah in months and months and months of, classifications of the jinn and all the rest. One thing that I think is really, really useful in ruqyah, learn your generic ruqyah, which you should have got from successful self-ruqyah. Then from there, learn how to tweak your ruqyah. And you're not going to tweak it massively. Some people will say, if it's Ayn, read Al-Falaq. If it's magic, read Surah An-Nas. No, it doesn't work like that. Your generic ruqyah is a base. You always build on your base. You always use your generic, basic ruqyah as a base. And I'm going to put it on the screen in a minute, and I'm going to talk you through it so you can see my generic ruqyah so that you get confident with it. That's your base. But then we're going to talk about how do I start to tweak my ruqyah in certain specific cases. And I think you might be surprised because I rarely change the surah. Sometimes, but I rarely change the surah. What I mostly do is tweak other things around the ruqyah to make particular cases more effective. So you talk about financial loss, talk about somebody who has just, for example, is falling asleep all of the time, somebody who has, loads of different, cases, children who have ruqyah problems and whatever. And what I want to do is to go into real world case studies. And I'm going to use these from my own emails and my own sort of questions I've been asked, but I am going to change some of the details and anonymize them, because it's not fair to the patients to say, hi, I'm a student in Kalemah, I live in, Mizhar, and I'm just asking you that I have this really bad problem with my wife, and she said this to me, and I said, no, it's not going to be like that, because we might know who the person is. Instead of that, I'm going to totally anonymize it. I'm going to change a couple of details. I'm going to take away where the person lives and what the person does, and I'll try not to use any from Dubai anyway, but don't worry, I never, ever, ever share details of what people tell me. But generic case studies, that is anonymized case studies. Here is a person who has a child, and their child is exhibiting 1, 2, 3, 4. What do we do? What do we do? And we're going to really try and get you guys to think about what we do, and you guys to kind of say, if I was in that position, what would I do? And I'm going to start asking questions. I'm going to say to you guys, okay, raise your hand. What would you do in this case study? What would you advise that person to do? And at the end of the day, you don't have to answer. I mean, people can, whoever's confident. But I want to build people who are really, knowledgeable in this field. I don't just want you to get entertained, go home and say, yeah, I found out that the jinn do this and the jinn do that. I want you guys to be people that if you experience this, la samahullah, may Allah not allow that to happen, or if your family, may Allah not allow that to happen, experience something, or you come across someone in your life from a family member or a friend, you can give them really, really good, sensible, best practice advice. And I'm all about best practice. I really do look at the world of medicine, and I really do copy concepts and principles from the world of medicine, like talking about, best practice, ethics, things like that, talking about how is the best way, in a generic sense, a process chart or a flow chart, how is the best way for us to deal with this problem in these specific cases. And if you want to move your ruqyah up to level 2, it's all about specifics. It's all about the details. It's all about you saying, okay, generic ruqyah, we tell everybody do the 7-day program. I think most of you guys got to there, yeah? I get some people send me an email, it's like, one brother goes to your ruqyah course, he told me to do the 7-day program. Like, alhamdulillah, he's got step 1. Maybe step 2, he told me to go on and do this ruqyah, and he gave me a sheet of ayat to read. Brilliant, we're there. Now we want to go up a level. Say someone has a child with a problem, financial issues, marriage issues, issues of being attacked by the jinn in certain places, ruqyah not working, something is happening, something else. What is our best practice? How do we go about tweaking the ruqyah or tweaking the advice to make it best suited to each particular case? And I think there's another layer of specialization later on, which I won't cover today. There is another layer, there is another stage. When you talk about some of these more advanced topics and, but me personally, I think you build from the basics. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick the screen, or I'm going to ask the guys to flick the screen for me. And here is my very simple website. It'll take a while for it to just kick in. I'm sure the guys will fix the projector bit by bit. But you don't really need the projector. You don't actually need to see what's written there. You just need to follow what it looks like. Okay, so this is the website. The website is changing, but this is the old version anyway. And, or at least inshallah it's changing. This is the old version. And the first thing you see when you go to Muhammad Tim Humble is you see, where do I start? This is a good place to start. I talked you through it last time. So that's a good article to send people when they say to you, where do I start? What do I do first? I've got all these problems. I've tried ruqyah. It doesn't work. Mental note, guys, if anyone says to you, they've tried ruqyah, I've been to Iraqi, it doesn't work, you know what I call the defeatist mentality. So they'll come to you and say, Assalamu alaikum, I've got a ruqyah problem. I've been to all the Iraqis, I've done all the ruqyah, it didn't work. What do you advise me to do? What do we always advise them to do? What's our best practice? Rewind. I say, pause it, rewind. Go right back to the beginning. Because we know that the Quran works and ruqyah works. So if your ruqyah didn't work, it's not the Quran that's wrong. It's something you're doing or you did in that ruqyah that's wrong. And at that point, you tell them, I recommend you do this and this and this. And they say, yeah, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. Yeah, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. Yeah, I read that every day. I read that. You know, you say, read Al-Falaq and An-Nas. They say, yeah, I read that every day. Again, pause, rewind. Say to them, I know you read it every day, yeah, and you're doing really well, and may Allah bless you in that, but I want you to do it with me from the beginning, because the only way for me to see where you're at is for me to take you right to the very, very, very beginning again. You know, like, if you went to a doctor, and you said to that doctor, Doctor, I've already been to all the best surgeons in the world, they couldn't help me, so what are you going to do? What would the doctor say? Rewind, go back to the beginning, give me your case history from the first day, tell me what's been going on bit by bit. So this article here, I'm not going to read it, I read it in the last course, is all about basically where do I start, and it basically says to people that go back to the beginning and start from scratch. So then we have the 7-day Ruqyah detox program. And as you know, this only lasts 7 days. It doesn't involve any day-to-day ruqyah. So let's just go through the 7-day detox program bit by bit. There's a whole load of introduction, but we're just going to basically take you through the basics of it. 7-day ruqyah program is recite on water, recite on olive oil, and then take the water and olive oil and use them during the week. That's all the 7-day program is. You can read the instructions on the website later on in detail. You can watch the video Successful Self-Ruqyah where I talk you through the whole program step by step. But basically it is get some water, get some oil, recite on the water one time at the beginning of the week, a long recitation, probably a couple of hours, read on it a long time, read on the oil, blow into the water, blow into the oil. So blow into the water, blow into the oil, and then use that water and oil during the week over the 7 days according to the instructions. Now, this is a very, very, very simple treatment. What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? What do I think are the advantages of it? What do I think are the disadvantages? The advantages of it, number one, it's simple. That's one advantage. Number two, it only requires ruqyah to be done at the beginning of the week. And so for people who are too busy, for people who can't read Quran, you can read for them and give them the water and oil. There's no live ruqyah needed on the patient. You can get someone else in the family to read on the water and the oil and give it to them. Again, I don't recommend you take water and oil from people you don't know or you don't trust, because magicians, you know, that's not a good idea. I've got some water I've read Al-Falaq on and it turns out that it's got the names of the shaitan inside. That's not good. But from people you trust, you know, when somebody reads on the water, on the oil for you, give it to somebody else. So it's simple. It doesn't require live ruqyah, meaning ruqyah over the patient. The third thing is that it's pretty mild in reactions. It's unlikely someone will take it's what they call, maybe in medicine, well tolerated. It's not likely that someone will take it and go and hit the ceiling, like they might if you did ruqyah on them. It's more likely that they'll get some pain, feeling unwell, lethargic, not feeling very good about themselves, and then they'll pick up during the week. The next benefit I think is really good for it is it gets rid of the simple cases. The whole purpose of the 7-day program is to get rid of 50% of cases before you even start. And that is get rid of all of the people who have either nothing wrong with them or who have mild and minor afflictions, a minor affliction from the evil eye, maybe, you know, some small problem, and the 7-day program gets rid of it. And they feel great at the end of the 7 days. And then you can say to them, you know, you should read on yourself, you know, read Baqarah a couple of times. And, you know, you can build on it from there. But the purpose is to get rid of the cases that don't need the treatment. The next purpose is, and this is my, you know, my go-to method, is that we use the 7-day program as a test to see who needs urgent treatment. Now, one caveat, which is huge. Never rely on a single test to diagnose whether someone has a ruqyah problem or not. Never rely on a single session, a single test, ever. The shaitan will manipulate how you see things. As Allah Azza wa Jal said, يُخَيَّلُ إِلَيْهِ مِن سِحْرِهِمْ أَنَّهَا تَسْعَى. يُخَيَّل, he will make you imagine in your eyes that something is there that is not there. Don't rely on a single session, don't rely on a single result. You don't get a scientist who does an experiment with one person and one result and then says, yeah, you know, like the conclusion is that you have this or you have that. Be patient when diagnosing people. Leave it over time. Let time go. Try a few times, a few different things. Your basic gold standard method of testing someone is, if they have symptoms that are not going away, they still have a problem. That's my gold standard. And I've heard so many things. If they twitch when you read Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, if they jump when you read Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq, if you read something from, surah, for example, Muddathir, they will do this. That is all complete rubbish. You can take it and you can just literally put it in the dustbin in your mind because it's completely false and it's extremely unreliable. The best method of telling whether someone has a problem is a good history of their case, followed by an analysis of their symptoms. That is the best way. Followed by a subsequent analysis after ruqyah. So let's say 3 things. Number 1, case history. When did the problem start? The first thing, if any of you have been to me for a ruqyah session, I'll tell you the first thing I say to pretty much everybody is, tell me a time when you didn't have a problem. Go back to the beginning of your life. Maybe you're a 5-year-old child, but when was it that you didn't have a problem? When was it that you were fine and healthy and well and good? When was that? Right. What happened first? What happened second? What happened third? Then what happened? And you build up a case history of the person's life. What happened with regard to this problem? It started last week. I just started scratching. Have you ever had any nightmares before that? Have you ever had anything happen before that? Any family problems before that? And you start to isolate it because people don't always know the truth. They'll say, last week I just started scratching. You say, okay, have you had any other sort of problems? No, nothing. Okay, what about sleep? How well do you sleep? Oh, I've had the worst nightmares recurring every day for the last 10 years. Okay, so we realize the problem didn't start last week. It's very likely that the problem started 10 years ago and not last week. So you start to build up a case study. You get an idea of what they think their symptoms are. Try not to prompt them too much, because if you say nightmare, if you say nightmares, they tend to say yes. Shaking, yes. Itching, yeah. And it gets like this for a long time. Bismillah. So one thing that's really important is let them naturally tell you symptoms and then prompt them. Start to just sort of say, okay, what about your sleeping pattern? How many hours do you sleep at night? And my real question is, do you suffer from frequent recurring nightmares? But I don't want to say that to them because they're going to say yes. So I say, how many hours do you sleep at night? Oh, I thought, on and off, I sleep really bad. Why is that? Oh, these nightmares. Right, got it. Okay, tick. And when you go through my video with Abu Ibrahim, we talk about some symptoms of ruqyah. Don't go through them and ask, but ask indirectly and find out, okay, what do they think their symptoms are? Like I had a case study of a brother who came to me and said to me, my only symptom is that I become very, very tired. This is my only symptom. Okay? When we investigated further, we found that he had many, many other symptoms. And that this was just his main one that was bothering him, and that was the one that was at the front of his head, and that's why he was telling about that particular symptom. Then do a ruqyah session with an open mind. Do not say, it's magic, there you go home, bismillah, here we go, it's magic, we're going to treat it like this. With a very open mind, do a ruqyah session. Make a note at the end of what you saw in terms of your symptoms and ask the patient how they felt during the ruqyah session. This is where it's really important not to prompt them again. Because if you say, did you get any twitching? well, like actually my shoulder was twitching, and honestly, it's terrible. If I start telling you about jinn moving in the body, everyone in the audience will start like doing this, yeah? It's really true. People, it's a psychological thing. So try to sort of say, how did you feel? That looked okay to me. Sometimes I give them a bit of reverse psychology, and I say to them, yeah, that you looked okay to me. No, subhanAllah, I had this burning sensation in my ear. Okay, what did that feel like? Build up a picture. And even when you've built up a picture, what does these three things, your case history, your initial patient-led diagnosis, where the patient tells you what they think is wrong with them, Ruqyah results from a Ruqyah session, what do you get out of that at the end? You get out of it nothing more than a hypothesis, nothing more than a hypothesis or a prognosis, nothing else. You do not get a guaranteed answer, and as long as you think you've got a guaranteed answer, you'll be wrong, and you'll be embarrassingly wrong. Like you'll just totally miss the mark. I did that one time. I got a brother come in, he said, I've got evil eye. I said, okay, tell me about your symptoms. He said, well, I was in school, and when I was in school, I was doing really well in my exams, and I just stopped one day. I failed all my exams, dropped out of school, all these bad things happened to me, and I thought, yeah, you've got the evil eye. That's totally consistent with what we know about the evil eye. You've got the evil eye. Right at the very end, I said, just tell me a bit about your family. He's like, oh yeah, my family are all magicians. Okay. So I was about to send him home with a case of the evil eye when I realized that he's suffering from magic. He's not suffering from the evil eye, or he may be suffering from the evil eye as well, but it didn't make sense to me. The evil eye wasn't matching up with all of his symptoms. Like he has movement in the body and like jinn going around and waking him up at night and whatever. And I'm thinking that just doesn't quite tie with the evil eye. But he was in school, he was doing really well, and then he failed. Maybe it's Ainul Jinn or something, the evil eye from the jinn following the eye or something. And then as soon as he said that to me, it clicked. We treat him for magic, and we realized that he's actually suffering from magic. So what you get at the end is a hypothesis and not a guarantee. It is an idea of what might be wrong with him. Now it's very important that you understand something, and I never used to know the word for this, but it's a true word, it's a very, very useful word. A cognitive bias. Something called a cognitive bias. You can search it on Wikipedia. A cognitive bias. Basically a bias in your brain. What is a cognitive bias? I'll give you a simple example. A cognitive bias is you are investing money in a company, and you've invested a large chunk of money, and you see that that company is going down the drain. So what do? What does everybody do? Invest more money. Which is, of course, the completely wrong thing to do, because you can see that you're going to lose your money. You can see the company is going down the drain, but you have something called a cognitive bias. In other words, your brain is biased to what you have previously decided. Your brain is, we would say, mailun nafs in Arabic. Your nafs has gone over to one thing, and it's not leaving it, even though it's becoming obvious to you that it's no good. And you see people literally throwing money again, and you see it in gamblers. They go into the casino and they gamble, and they lose. And so they gamble again, and they lose, and they gamble again, and they lose, and they just keep gambling and losing. You're thinking, look, after half the night, wouldn't you have walked out and just say, cut my losses? No, again. You develop a cognitive bias because your brain has kind of settled on a certain idea. This is very dangerous in Ruqyah. So what happens is you've decided that, because you know so much about Ruqyah, that this problem is the evil eye. And it leads you to ignore real symptoms. And it happens in medicine, it happens with doctors as well. The doctor has decided you're suffering from epilepsy and can't see that you're clearly suffering from something different because they have made an investment of time and energy in thinking about the epilepsy that you're suffering from. So they keep piling you with more and more epilepsy medication, and more of it, and more of it, and more, and treatments and specialists, because the doctor, if he was awake, to his symptoms would see that he's actually being biased. He can see in front of him that it's not epilepsy, and he realized 2 weeks ago it's not epilepsy. But because he had made that decision previously, he becomes biased to the effort and the energy he has spent making that decision. So this happens in Ruqyah as well. You've decided the person is not, there's nothing wrong with them, and even though you start to see signs that they have a jinn problem, you still say there's nothing wrong with you, it's psychological, ignore the twitching, ignore the floating, ignore the, moving up and down, no, it's psychological, it's just your brain. Because why? You've made yourself something and you've latched onto it like a leech and you don't let go. This is a natural state of the human nafs. All of us do it. Wikipedia, just the word cognitive bias, you'll see loads of examples. People do it in finance, people do it in jobs, people do it in everything. You invest a lot of time in something and you stay doing something you know fine well is wrong because you invested so much time in doing it. So be careful about that. When you make a diagnosis for someone, keep it as a rough idea, hypothesis, and keep an open mind and let yourself be swayed by other things as things develop, and always be willing to say, I'm wrong. And that's a fundamental Islamic principle. Always be willing to say, I'm wrong. I made a mistake. I got it wrong. We need to change the treatment. And alhamdulillah, Ruqyah has a brilliant thing about it, which is that the treatment is not that different. So it's not like you're giving someone, cancer drugs when they have like a hormone problem, or you're giving someone, at the end of the day, you're giving someone a similar kind of treatment. But just, for your own best practice, don't become hooked on one decision. So the 7-day program is what I use as my initial test. When you go to the doctor has an initial test, right? Pretty much everything you go for, he's going to put that, stethoscope on your chest, and he's going to look in your ear, and he's going to look in your eye, and he's going to kind of, poke around. And, that's kind of what every doctor does, right? Like when you go to a general practitioner, he might take your blood pressure and, just take your temperature. That's sort of generic stuff. The 7-day program, that's my generic stuff. That's what I do with pretty much everyone. I say, do it, let's see how you go, tell me how it is after a week, and now let's review. So what will happen after the 7-day program? We analyze the symptoms again. Is the 7-day program giving us further evidence for this? Or is the 7-day program indicating to us that no, it's maybe something different? If you're unsure, don't be frightened to ask them to do it again. Because it's not like it's harmful for you. It's perfectly healthy, it has no side effects. Brilliant difference between Ruqyah and medicine. One of the things I always tell everybody, that Ruqyah has no side effects. Yeah, there's no medicine in the world that doesn't have a side effect of some sort. Open up the leaflet and it will say side effects, like mild cough, temperature, rash, death, loads of various other things, in these leaflets. Ruqyah has no side effects. Nothing except good. The Quran brings nothing except good. So inshallah, there's no harm in asking them, okay, let's do it again. Sometimes basically, I would say, in your process, after the 7-day program, you have one of two decisions to make. Either you're very confident that there's no problem, or you know there's a problem, or you're unsure. And unsure and knowing there's a problem go together in the same box. So either you know there's a problem, unsure, they're together, or on the other side, like A is if you know the problem or you're unsure, B is you think there's no issue. If you think there's no issue, what do you tell the patient to do? What does everyone do? Go home, there's nothing wrong with you, go to the doctor. And that is also wrong. What you say to them is, okay, we haven't found a problem in this test. What I want you to do, go home, do a little bit of regular Ruqyah on yourself, nothing too intensive, just read on yourself, sort of Al-Falaq al-Nas, sort of regular Ruqyah from time to time. Do the 7-day program every few months, and let's see if anything changes in 3 months or 6 months. That is very good best practice. I mean, that is my best practice. I always find it to be best because it catches the one time when you really mess things up and you have someone with a serious affliction that you missed and you think they don't have a problem. You never say to anyone, you've not got a problem, go home, you're fine, you need to go to a psychiatrist, you just got mental issues, go away. Instead, what we say to them is, I haven't got anything that I want to do for your treatment right now. I'm quite happy with how the 7-day program went. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to sort of do your adhkar for protection. Read falaq and nas over yourself before you go to sleep and all the rest. And once a month, repeat the 7-day program for, let's say, 3 months. After 3 months, or if you feel anything has changed, come and see me again. What that does is that helps to cement whether you are right or whether you are wrong. And what's the gold standard about them being better? Are the symptoms completely gone? Completely gone. Even after a month of further ruqyah, the symptoms are completely gone. We mentioned this in the last ruqyah session, in the last workshop. So someone comes to you and says, I think I might have a jinn problem. I am waking up suddenly at night and I feel very sort of uneasy. You say, okay, that's pretty consistent with a jinn problem, but let's see, there's lots of things it could be. So let's have a look. 7-day program comes, I feel fine, I didn't feel any problems, I felt great all throughout the program, I feel great now. Okay, you still having any sleeping problems? I don't know, because it's been a week. I kind of feel, yeah, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is, we didn't get anything major out of it, but let's just keep going. Do your adhkar of protection, tawbah, come to some Islamic classes, learn about your religion, and, after that, what you're going to do is, once a month, repeat the 7-day program, come back to me after 3 months, let's see how you are. They come back and say, problem's gone, I feel great. I'm not waking up anymore in the night. It could be that the problem was medical and the ruqyah fixed it. It could be the problem was a jinn problem and the 7-day program fixed it. It could be that it was something completely different. But alhamdulillah, the problem is fixed. If they come back to you after 3 months and say to you, I've still got the problem, at that point I would probably say, using judgment, you might want to, definitely at some point you would want to see a medical professional and see if there's anything medical there. I usually advise people right off the bat, go and see a medical professional if it's something that I think has a medical aspect to it. But on top of that, just keep an eye on them and just say, okay, just let's just keep an eye on it, keep doing your adhkar, keep doing your recitation, let's see what's happening. And over time, things will become clear. Over time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is al-Fattah, the one who opens the doors for you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the door for you to know what the person's problem is, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. But now we deal with the next case. And that is when you're unsure what is going on. Like you're like, this is, I don't know. I feel it might be a problem. It might not be. Or there's a problem. So they do the 7-day program and say it was a nightmare. I was shaking all over. I was waking up. I was screaming. I was all this type of stuff. Not very common with the 7-day program. It's quite mild. But you get some sort of reaction. So right, now we move them on to the full ruqyah program. Because the 7-day program is just a baby treatment. It's the same when your doctor just puts a stethoscope on your chest and goes, yeah, you sound fine, go away. It's like the same thing. It's a very, very basic treatment. You want to lead it up to the next treatment. And normally, I still don't get involved in ruqyah at this point. I tell people, do the full ruqyah program for 1 month. And I give them 2 options. You can do it by yourself, or preferably, you can do it within the family. So to have, like, say, a lady comes, get your husband to read on you, read on yourself and get your husband to read on you. And we do that for about a month, 1 month. And the reason we do it for about a month is to develop a pattern. And we tell them, make yourself a little diary of what's happening during the month of doing this full ruqyah program. Now, this full ruqyah program involves a number of things. It involves all of the adhkar. It involves doing the 7-day program every other week. And it involves 45 minutes of ruqyah a day. And that's where I come to my point that most people don't do it because it's very hard to do 45 minutes a day when you're working. 45 minutes of ruqyah every single day for 1 month, along with all of the other points that are mentioned in the program. And it's the link below my link on the 7-day program. And when you see the 7-day program, the first one is where do I start? The second one is the 7-day program. The third link is the full ruqyah program, and do it for a month. If you have a severe reaction or something really bad is happening, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you at the end of the month and I'll see how you are managing. Bring me your diary of what happened. It's important they keep a diary because people don't remember. People say, yeah, I was kind of fine. Oh yeah, I did have that. Like it's very difficult. So instead of that, what you want to do is you want to say to people, keep yourself a little diary. Don't burden me with like everything you did in the day and what you ate and like other things. Just literally did the ruqyah, felt okay, a little bit shaky on this ayah, a little bit shaky here. Towards the end, this was happening. I noticed this. And you get them just to journal their ideas, just 2-3 lines, and either email it to you or whatever, but in a big collection of what happened over 2 weeks or what happened over 30 days. At this point, you should be much, much better equipped to make a decision as to whether you want to recite over them or whether you want to continue them on with the treatment. If they are managing well with the treatment, so this is our next process. If they are managing well with the treatment and you feel happy that they are coping, even though they have a problem, they're shaking, they're screaming, they're crying, but they're managing, then I don't advise that you need to go and do ruqyah on them. If they are coping themselves, leave it between them and Allah. If they're clearly not coping, get a family member involved. If they clearly can't do it on themselves, get a family member involved. If you feel it's a really exceptional case and things are really not looking great, and you really have some concerns or you want some further information, do a ruqyah session or 2 or 3 yourself. Do not commit to doing ruqyah for them forever. I made this mistake, wallahi, I consider it to be one of the greatest mistakes I made in ruqyah, is that I would say to people, yeah, I'll do ruqyah for you. And then it becomes a promise, binding, that Allah will ask you about Yawm al-Qiyamah. Say, I will come and do 1 session for you, I will see how you are. 2 sessions for you, a week of ruqyah, whatever, see how you are. And you carry on like this. And that is the basic method of ruqyah. Someone might say, what am I reading in the 45 minutes? So I'm super strict on this. The only thing you are permitted to read in the 45 minutes is a proven sunnah for ruqyah. And the proven sunnah for ruqyah can be divided into 2 things, ayat of the Quran and dua authentically reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as for the ayat of the Quran that are proven in ruqyah, Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayatul Kursi, آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون قل يا أيها الكافرون قل هو الله أحد قل أعوذ برب الفلق and قل أعوذ برب الناس. And I would suggest that you put most of your emphasis on the latter 2, the last 2, Al-Falaq and An-Nas, because they were revealed for this purpose. Now, am I, Muhammad Tim, saying to you, you should not read Yasin and Safat and, Al-A'raf and the other? No, not at all. But I'm not allowing you to read it inside of the 45 minutes. If you want to read Surah Al-A'raf, read it after the 45 minutes. If you want to read Surah Al-Safat, read it after the 45 minutes. If you want to read Surah Yasin, read it after the 45 minutes. Do not replace قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ with Surah Yasin. Because first of all, Al-Falaq and Al-Nas were revealed for the purpose of ruqyah. They were revealed for this reason. And there is no way that you should turn away from something that was revealed for that reason to something that has a general shifa, because the whole Quran has a shifa in it, and there's no harm in reading any part of the Quran. But I'm really strict on this. I've tested it with many people. Limit yourself in the 45 minutes to, let's say, 35 minutes of reciting the Quran, Al-Fatiha, maybe 7 times, or an odd number, or 3 times, a part of Surah Al-Baqarah, or if you like, Ayatul Kursi, Aman al-Rasul, Al-Kafirun, Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, and Al-Nas. And a particular emphasis on the last 2 or the last 3. Again and again and again and again. It's better you do it in an odd number. 7 is authentically reported, 3 is authentically reported, and any odd number, because Inna Allaha witrun yuhibbul witr. Allah is odd in number, and He loves those things which are odd in number. That's it. Don't give it 76 times, 77 times, 23 times in the day. This is all bid'ah. Give it either 3 or 7, or any odd number that you wish. And if you do an even number, it doesn't harm you. But don't make it like, I always read it 77 times after every prayer. This is bid'ah and it will not help you. So, the person goes on, reading this. Then, if they want to read, and I read myself, if they want to read وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينَ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ, or they want to read وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ ائْتُونِي بِكُلِّ سَاحِرٍ عَلِيمٍ, or they want to read قالوا يا موسى إما أن تلقي وإما أن نكون أول من ألقى, or they want to read قالوا يا موسى إما أن تلقي وإما أن نكون نحن الملقين, or they want to read وإن يمسسك الله بضر فلا كاشف له إلا هو, or they want to read any other part of the Quran, you do it after the 45 minutes. And I'm going to give you an evidence for this. And I think I'm one of the only people that I've seen who said this, but I'll tell you why. The shaitan has a particular plot, which Ibn al-Qayyim and others, rahimahumullah, mentioned. And that is, the shaitan will take you away from al-fadil to al-mafdul. He will take you away from something which is better to something which is good but not as good. Something which is better to something which is good but not as effective. And so what I don't want to happen is, everyone thinks that Al-Falaq and An-Nas, the baby surahs, we teach them to our kids, not going to make any difference. Let me read something complicated, it's going to work better. And the reality is that nothing is going to work better than the 2 surahs that were revealed for this purpose. So I always push people, in that 45 or 35 minutes, you are reading the sunnah for ruqyah. First of all, because the barakah is going to be in following the hadi of the Prophet ﷺ, the guidance and the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and no doubt the fact that you're using the surah and the ayat the Sahaba used and you're doing it in the right way. Then after that, if you want to make more time and you want to read any part of the Quran, all of the Quran is shifa. Read the ayat of magic for the one who has magic. Read the ayat of ayn for the one who has ayn. Read the ayat of jinn, surah al-jinn for the one who has jinn possession. Ala kayfak, like they say, do it as you like. But don't replace that first 45 minutes, because at the end of the day, always the way the Prophet ﷺ did something is better than the way that anyone else after him would do it. Even the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, even the likes of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, and the great raqis of history, the way the Prophet ﷺ did it is always, always better. So I always put that first. And I believe that's a part of the statement of Allah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُقَدِّمُوا بَيْنَ يَدَيِ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Do not put yourself in front of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so we always put the sunnah first. Then, it doesn't matter how much we read. I love reading from those ayahs I mentioned. I read ayahs that are specific to certain circumstances, ayat of magic for magic, ayat of jinn for jinn issues, ayat of ayn for ayn issues, ayat which affect me as a person. Like I often read from Surah Al-Anbiya, وَأَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ, and the dua of Yunus, لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. And these are all within the one page of Surah Al-Anbiya. Sometimes we read Surah Safat, sometimes we read Surah Al-Jinn, sometimes we read Surah Yasin. We read a lot of surahs of the Quran. But we don't go away from that first 35, 45 minutes of strictly adhering to Al-Fatiha, Al-Falaq, Al-Nas, Ayat Al-Kursi, etc. Because these are proven in their virtue in this field. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Okay. What do you do for the last 10 minutes of the 45? Authentic dua mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. And wallahi, people do not know. And if I were to say, if someone to ask me the question, Muhammad Tim, what is the biggest misconception or the biggest thing people don't know while they're doing ruqyah? I would say the value of dua. The value of dua and the value of leaving your sins. But definitely the value of dua. Because people, read and read and read. But the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, when he would read, he would say, for example, أَذْهِبِ الْبَأْسَ رَبَّ النَّاسِ إِشْفِ وَأَنْتَ الشَّافِي لَا شِفَاءَ إِلَّا شِفَاءُكَ شِفَاءً لَا يُغَادِرُ سَقَمًا. Make the illness go away, Lord of mankind. Cure them and you are the curer. There is no cure except for your cure, a cure that leaves no sickness. So I often spend the last 10 minutes or the first 10 minutes reading these dua, or in between when you get tired, switch to the dua, read the dua and read, and blow over the person, read over the person. And if you want to refer to how to blow and how to read, the Quran as a cure is an entire video on that topic. Then after that, after that 45 minutes is up, freestyle. Whatever you want to do. Yeah, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to read, whatever any Raqi has told you is beneficial, Bismillah. As long as it's a sunnah, it's not a bid'ah, as long as it's from the Quran and the names of Allah and the authentic sunnah, Bismillah. In clear Arabic with no shirk, no confusing words, no like these strange words. As long as it is according to the conditions of Ruqyah, which we mentioned in the last workshop and other workshops, Bismillah, go ahead and do it. And that I find is the best way of joining. Because someone says to me, and a lot of people disagree, I'm telling you something very controversial. A lot of people will come to me and say to me, Muhammad, Tim, you teach people the wrong way. You should teach them when they know that it's magic to only read وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْرُ الشَّيَاطِينَ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. So I say, okay, akhi, Jamil. What did the Prophet ﷺ do when he was afflicted by magic? So he read Al-Falaq and Al-Nas. هذا هو. This is it. Did he read وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينَ? No. Not even in a single riwayah. Now I'm not saying don't read it, because the whole of the Quran is shifa. I'm saying don't replace the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ with qila wa qal. This guy said it works, it's proven, all of the Raqis know it works, everyone who does Ruqyah know it works. It does work, and I know it works, but I still don't have that, feeling to put it ahead of Al-Falaq and Al-Nas that were revealed for this purpose. And then they will say, yeah, you don't know, it's a different kind of magic, you haven't taught the people that, if it's sihr tafriq, you have to use wattaba'u, and if it's sihr al-qatl, you have to use Al-Falaq and Al-Nas. We say, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Give me your proof. You have a dalil from the sunnah, from the aqwal of the salaf, you have something I can hold on to, or just, what your soul desires. Reality is they have no proof. So I'm not saying leave their way is really good. But I'm saying just give yourself that initial period of going according to the strict sunnah, and then branch off and go to the sunnah which is allowed. And the Prophet ﷺ said, show me your ruqyah, and whatever ruqyah did not contain shirk, he allowed it. So inshallah you have freedom to do whatever it is that you want. But begin with what he began with. أَبْدَأُ بِمَا بَدَأَ اللَّهُ بِهِ. I begin with what Allah began with, and what His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam began with. And then we will go off and do our different ayat and our different things and learn all our specifics, and we will tweak. The reason I'm telling you all this, and the reason I've taken so long to tell you all of this is your basic ruqyah regardless of the problem. Regardless of sihr, ayn, sihr and ayn, jinn possession. Jinn possession followed by ayn followed by jinn possession, sihr tafriq, sihr qatl, sihr tadmir, sihr, go through all of the types of sihr that anyone has ever written about, and this method will not let you down in any of them bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It will not let you down in any method. You stick to this method, then what we're going to learn today is how do we tweak what is past that 45 minutes? How do we tweak what is beyond that to make the ruqyah more effective? And the more you learn about ruqyah, and some of you guys will go off and read, the likes of, amazing books like this book by Sheikh Mashhur Hassan Salman on Fath al-Mannan. It's called Fath al-Mannan, the opinions of Ibn Taymiyyah with regard to the jinn. And these kind of, books with just loads of information in and loads of ayat and ideas and whatever, but always build them on top of your generic, standard, everybody can do it ruqyah. And I probably say Sheikh Adil had a big influence on me in this, because I saw that he made it easy for the people. If we start saying, if it's sihr tafriq, you have to use this. If it's sihr tadmir, you have to use this. If it's sihr al-qatl, you have to use this. If it's this, you have to use this. We make ruqyah beyond the ability of your average Muslim. It becomes only the specialization of a handful of people, and we've already agreed that it's impossible for that to work. So we give a generic ruqyah that works for everybody, and then we tweak it later on beyond that and we start looking at specific case studies, and we start looking at how we can, how we can sort of deal with things and how we can improve. I wanted to start taking you through some specific issues or circumstances that some people have, and I think the first one we will start with is the issue of children. Because somebody comes along to you and says to you, well, your Ruqyah method is fine and it's great, but I have a little child. And let me give you a case study to illustrate that. I'll give you a couple of case studies. One case study of a person who came to me and said to me, I have a young child, a boy, around about, I think, 7 years old, who wakes up every single night at 3 a.m. with a terrible nightmare. And it's always 3 a.m. and it's always a really, really, really bad nightmare. They become really unsettled and I have to settle them for a long, long, long period of time. And this is one of the problems. And another case, which I just put a couple in your mind while you listen to the answer, of a little girl who suffers from involuntary movements. So she will be sitting down and she will just, like move her hand or shake or move her leg or something like that. And so we want to sort of ask ourselves, okay, could these two both be, is there anything to say that it's not a jinn issue? Both of them could be. Both of them have, people do shake when it comes to the jinn. People do wake up with nightmares. What else are you thinking about? You're also thinking about the fact that for the boy, waking up at 3 a.m. every night is very consistent. Like if she said he has nightmares from time to time, I would have said, probably just need to, take the toys out of his room and he'll be fine. But you sort of talk about someone waking up at 3 a.m. every single night on the dot with the same nightmare. That is something that has certainly an indication of a problem. Is it conclusive? No. Because a person could have gone through a really bad experience when they were younger and had a really deep, psychological scar and, sort of something like that. But, it's certainly well worth investigating. It's well worth investigating. So how do we deal with children? Well, what I do with children is I divide children into 3 separate cases or 3 separate boxes. The first is concern over children without confirmed symptoms. So this is the likes of the parent who comes to you and says, my son is just not himself. He just doesn't seem right. Do you dismiss that? Do you say to somebody, oh, well, he'll be fine, just, give him a couple of days? No, you have to take it seriously. Like a doctor, if someone comes and says, I have a headache, this person might have a brain tumor. At the end of the day, you have to take it seriously. They come and they say that my child is just not themselves, or he's had a rash that hasn't gone away for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. So what do you sort of do? Usually at this point, I recommend the 7-day program to them, missing out the honey if the child is less than 1 year old. I personally don't miss it out for my own children, but out of the whole disclaimer of not giving honey to children who are 1 year old and under, just out of like crossing the T's and dotting the I's, I would say don't give honey to the child if he's less than 1 year old. According to medical advice, yani. Also, don't give honey to a diabetic and all the other stuff. I usually ask people, are you diabetic, anything like that. If there's anything in the program you can't use, then don't use it. Don't be taking honey and then end up in a, like in like DK or something like that, and you end up with, diabetic ketoacidosis, and the person ends up in hospital because they were just drinking gallons and gallons of whatever honey and all sorts of other things and not watching their glucose levels. Be careful, just check with people. If you're allergic to black seed, don't go and throw 7 black seeds in your throat and say, oh, well, Allah will save me, like we usually ask people. But yeah, so if it's concern over children, but there's no symptom, there's nothing you can grab hold of and say, yeah, this is what's wrong with them. It's a feeling they're not quite themselves. Maybe it's a worried parent. Maybe it's an over-worried parent. Maybe it is something for real. So I usually say to them, right, let's just take them on the 7-day program. Why do we like the 7-day program for kids? It's super easy. The parents can do the reading. They can put the oil on the child before they go to bed. Olive oil is good for your skin anyway. It'll be good for the child. Give them the water. I mean, the children can take water no matter what age. They can have the water, sterilized and boiled and whatever. And then they can, just give it to them in a little baby bottle, or they can, if their child is older, they can, just give them a glass of water to drink, and it's super easy. The child doesn't feel anything, difficult about it. The parent finds it pretty easy, and most of the time, it gets rid of the problem. And the reason it gets rid of the problem a lot of the time is because children don't have any sin. And because children don't have any sin, the shaitan struggles to remain within them, except in the most severe cases of magic. It's very hard for the shaitan to remain within the child, because there's nothing to hold on to. Shaitan feeds off of sins and disobedience and whatever, and there's nothing to hold on to when it comes to this child, so the child is sinless. So it's, at that point, I don't recommend giving the child a full Ruqyah program. Why? It's really disruptive, and it's really not very nice for the child to sit that child down and be sort of reading in their ear and blowing over them, and it could be really scary for the child. So just start with the 7-day program. Let's see what happens. And most of those kids whose parents just have a generic concern over them will just get better, alhamdulillah. Bear in mind, Ruqyah works for medical issues as well as non-medical issues. I mean, the parents get fine. And I usually teach the parents some basic tips for protecting your child. So as an example for that, reading over them, أعيذك بكلمات الله التامة من كل شيطان وهامة ومن كل عين لامة. أعيذك for a boy, أعيذك for a girl. And just reading that over, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do over Al-Hasan, Al-Hussein, radiyallahu anhuma. So that's, something that is, inshallah, really easy for the parent to do. And just saying to them that, if you're finding a little bit of concern over your child, read Al-Falaq and An-Nas over them before they go to sleep, blow on them, wipe over them, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do for Aisha, and Aisha used to do for him when he was sick. If he had a fever or if he was sick, then Aisha, radiyallahu anha, she would take his hands, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, and she would blow Al-Falaq and An-Nas into his hands, because his hands have more barakah, of course, and she would put his hands over his body, and he would do the same for his family, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when they were sick. So these basic tips of just, what we call sort of daily Ruqyah, because some people ask the question, it's a very common question, should I be doing Ruqyah if I don't have a problem? My answer is no, not Ruqyah, but just daily Ruqyah, the daily sort of Al-Falaq and An-Nas, 3 times after Fajr, 3 times after Asr, before you go to sleep, these daily sort of protections. And if necessary, if you've got a fever or something, blow over yourself, wipe over your body, these basic things, we've mentioned them in the video, the Quran as a cure. So really simple. Educate the parents, talk to about what they should be concerned about, and make sure you give the parents a clear line, which if it is crossed, they should come back to see you. Or a clear, let's say, flag that should be raised. So for example, if they're not getting better in a week, come back and see me. If you are concerned at any time, you need to do this. And make sure also, if you think they need to see a doctor, that from good ethics is that you recommend for them to see a doctor, if you think they need that. Because not good ethics, if you think the child is suffering from, a severe fever that they need treatment for, then it's not good ethics for you to say, yeah, do Ruqyah, and, inshallah, everything will be fine. No, at the end of the day, you can, if you really believe this problem is one that needs medical treatment, you have to then refer them and say, while you're doing the Ruqyah, I think you should go and see a medical professional. If they're scared about that, because they're scared the medical professional might give them something that goes against the Ruqyah or whatever, just advise them to go and see a practicing Muslim. Just go see a practicing Muslim doctor. And I'm quite sure that they will be aware of what is allowed in Islam and what is not allowed in Islam, inshallah, and they'll give you some good advice. And inshallah, it'll be an all clear. But just if you fear, especially with children can deteriorate so rapidly that you don't do something silly and have a child that comes to you with, malaria or something like that, or meningitis or whatever, or something really, really serious, and then you say, read Al-Falaq and An-Nas and send them home, and that child dies, you will feel very, very, you would feel awful about not giving them the right advice. So make sure that, if you do see that the child has something that looks to be medical, out of good ethics, even though the parent should know that anyway, don't say to someone, don't go to the doctor, but you might want to say to them, look, why don't you just take, there's a good brother we know, a friend of ours, he's a good medical professional, he'll have a little look, just make sure there's nothing to be concerned about, and have you checked for this, have you checked for this, just basic, simple advice. But that's what we do with children that don't have confirmed symptoms. The second group are children who have confirmed Ruqyah symptoms, and I use the word Ruqyah to mean jinn, magic, evil eye, and you are very sure that that is what is wrong with them, but the jinn doesn't take over the child. This is the exception. The jinn doesn't take over the child. That means when you read on the child, you can see that there are problems going on, there is a Ruqyah case to be dealt with, but the child is not losing their mind and control, and the jinn sort of, and it's controllable. It's kind of like, let's say it's less severe. For these children, I recommend the full Ruqyah program. So that's the 7-day program included, along with the full Ruqyah program of the 45 minutes. But I recommend that you do it in a very passive way. Because children, you can't sit them down and lock their arms and force them to sit still. Some parents bring their children to me for Ruqyah, and they're like, sit still, sit still. They're children. If they are not having a major jinn problem where the jinn is taking over them and causing them to go up in the air, or causing them to scream and shout and kick and hit, then just let them play and recite Ruqyah over them. Just allow them to move around, allow them to be themselves, stay around near them, blow on them, read on them in the same room, but don't make them sit for 45 minutes like a statue, because most children can't do it. So this is the first difference. And don't shout or scream. None of this, "Ukhruj adu Allah." Yeah? None of this, yeah? Because they're little children, and they can get scared, they can get psychologically damaged, and they can end up having more of a problem from your shouting and screaming than they do from the jinn. I brought this Raqi, and he literally beat me with a stick and started screaming at me, "Leave, O enemy of Allah, enemy of Allah." And this child is only hearing these words why am I the enemy of Allah? What have I done? So just when it comes to children who don't have really severe symptoms, let the Ruqyah be passive. That means don't kind of grab them and read in their ear. I usually sit them down next to me. I tell them what I'm going to do. So again, good ethical bedside manner, tell them, I'm going to read on you, I'm going to put my hand on your head, I might blow on you like this, do you mind me doing that, is that okay? Oh no, it's fine, okay, so sit with me. You can go around if you want, if you start going down on the floor and playing, I'll just sit on the floor with you and let you play with your toys, as long as the toys are halal, of course. No musical toys, no toys with faces, otherwise at the end of the day you're just, going one step forward, 2 steps back. So sit down, maybe the child, start reading on the child, I've got just my maybe hand on the head, maybe hand on the hand or something like that, and I'm just sitting next to the child and just reading. And maybe the child gets bored, starts fidgeting, okay, let them go, they go and play with their toys on the floor. So I sit with them on the floor, just read my Quran, maybe every now and again, gentle blowing on them, ask them, are you okay, is everything all right? Everything's fine, do you want anything? And just really, really gentle and simple and passive. The only time you need to get really serious about Ruqyah in a child is if the jinn is really taking over the child to the extent that the child is extremely violent, punching, kicking, biting, scratching, screaming, flipping themselves over. That is when you need to take a more active role. Now, it doesn't mean you need to beat them with a stick or shout and scream at them, but you do need to be a bit more active, a bit more in your face, a bit more near to them, maybe gently controlling them. And this brings me to this issue of the violent jinn, but I'll just pause that and come back to it, inshallah, in a second. So in all of the above cases, I have certain principles. Number one, at all times, the safety and the comfort of the child is paramount. Do not treat that child like an adult. It is totally unethical, it's totally wrong to treat that child as an adult. The child should feel comfortable with the Ruqyah. They should be relaxed, they should be happy. You should play with them if they want to play, and maybe you want to spend 5-10 minutes with them outside of the ruqyah session so they don't, you're not this big bad wolf who comes and, shouts at them, but, you come and play with them. And then later on, maybe after a short while, you start doing a little bit of ruqyah on them, give them a break, let them run around. Some people ask the question, should I do this when the child is asleep? In general, we don't recommend ruqyah when people are asleep if you can avoid it. But if you're really struggling, you can try, inshallah. But we consider that to be less than perfect, to do ruqyah when the person is asleep. We always try to keep the person awake. But if the child goes to sleep in the ruqyah, don't pick them up and shake them. Don't just let them go to sleep, let them wake up. If it's passive, if it's an active ruqyah session where the child is really violent, then, you've got to keep the child safe and comfortable at all times. This is a child, yeah? Not only could you go to prison for a very, very long time if you do something silly, but also you could ruin that child's life, and that's more important, at the end of the day. So you treat them like a child, don't treat them like an adult. My next point, never ever hit a child. Abadan. Doesn't matter what the jinn is doing to you, doesn't matter how much they're biting you or kicking you or scratching you, do not hit a child ever. Yeah? If you're a big adult and you whack a child over the head, you can kill them. Don't hit a child. Just type in Ruqyah death in Google, and you will get a long list of newspaper articles of people who have beaten their children to death. Because the jinn came out, and let me be honest with you, hitting people in Ruqyah is not a great idea at the best of times. If you get it wrong, you can not only go to prison for a very long time, but you won't get the jinn out either. And the jinn will just be laughing at you. It'll be like, it'll be like this. It's like you trying to punch a professional boxer, right? So you go up and you throw a right hook, and the boxer just goes like this, yeah? And, he just dodges your hand, and he's just bobbing and weaving, and you're just punching air. That is what will happen if you try to hit the jinn. Unless you're really good at it and you really know what you're doing, what's going to happen is you're going to be punching air, and the jinn is just going to be moving around every time, dodging your punch in so easily. And the patient is going to end up black and bruised and maybe dead. So we never, ever, ever, ever hit a child under any circumstances, even if the child is kicking you, scratching you, biting you, whatever. We don't give him a slap, yeah? We have another alternative, which I'll talk about when we talk about violent jinn. Also, the hardest thing about ruqyah for children, and this is a major thing for me, the hardest thing about ruqyah for children is children can't explain their feelings like adults. So children can't tell you, I've got a jinn moving around inside of me, I can see this horrible thing. Children will tend to cry, they will tend to be very restricted, and it's very hard to establish a baseline. Let me tell you what I mean by establishing a baseline. When I do ruqyah on an adult, I always try to establish a baseline. I try to establish what is normal behavior so that I can see what is not normal. So the adult is sitting there, and I'm reading, and then the adult goes like that. That is not normal behavior. So that is outside of the baseline. Yeah, you've got a baseline that's outside of the baseline. With children, nothing is outside of the baseline. That's the problem. The child goes like that. Children do that. Children flip. Children, start playing with their fingers. If I have an adult who's playing with their fingers, I'll say to them, could you put your fingers in flat on the floor for me? Because I want to establish whether they are playing with their fingers or the jinn are playing with their fingers. So I'll say, could you just put your hands, flat on the table for me if you don't mind? And the adult will sit there like this, and I'll realize they're just fidgety. But the child will, because children are children, and that's how they do things. So one of the hardest things is your diagnosis will often be wrong because the child can't tell you what's wrong with them. And you may misunderstand a jinn problem where one isn't there because the child is just fidgety. So I like to observe the child playing naturally, see how they are. Bear in mind, a strange person coming and reading Quran in your ear is enough to make anyone fidgety. So you would expect a child to be a little bit scared, a little bit fidgety. Don't think it's the jinn's presence that's making the child scared. It's probably just you. You can build over time. But what I'm saying is children need a lot longer time to establish what is normal and what isn't. Parents can help you because you can say to the parents, how did you feel about their behavior during the ruqyah session? Was that pretty much normal for you? Yeah, he's pretty, he's just doing what he normally does. Okay, that's fine. But be careful with children that they can't tell you what they're feeling and they can't give you like a standard of behavior that an adult would give you, whereby you can tell this is a jinn and this is them. It's a lot harder with a child. If the child is old enough to understand, do discuss with them and focus on removing the fear of the shaitan. What I always focus on with my kids and with other people's kids when I see them for ruqyah is, you've got to remove the fear of the shaitan. Because cartoons, TV, music, whatever, all of it increases you in fear of the shaitan. This evil, ghost that is going to come and pull me from under my bed, and this monster that lives under my pillow. And what you should tell the kids is, if you have a monster under your pillow, let me show you how to get rid of it. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. Monster gone. Monster dead. Monster no come back again. This is what we tell the kids. Make it fun for them. Like, say, come on, I want to practice. We're going to practice killing the jinn, or we're going to practice pushing, making the jinn run away. So if you see a jinni, comes to you, what you're going to do. And even if they know just one word, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Bismillah, and khalas, it's gone. No problem. So you teach the children not to fear the shaitan. You teach the children not to fear the shaitan and not to be scared of the shaitan, because the biggest weapon the shaitan has over the child is not sin. The biggest weapon the shaitan has over us is sin and ignorance. But the biggest weapon the child has over, or the shaitan has over the child, is fear. The child gets scared, starts to panic, doesn't know what to do, starts screaming, doesn't tell you what's wrong with them. Say, and I've seen kids, little kids, who can see the jinn with their eyes, and they'll say, it's okay, I just, Uncle Tim, I just read on the jinn and I said, A'udhu Billah, and he ran away. These are children who are experiencing what your average adult would not be able to sleep for a week if they saw. And yet these children are totally able to experience it and live through it and not have any sort of adverse effect from it, because they've been drilled into them from the beginning not to fear the shaitan. So I think that's extremely important. Make light of the issue, make fun of the shaitan. You're allowed to make fun of the shaitan. He's so weak that, every time he sees the angels, he runs away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, when Iblis saw Iblis, who is the strongest of them, saw the army of angels approaching, he turned his back and ran away and said, Inni akhafullah, I fear Allah. Inni ara ma la tarawn, inni akhafullah. I see what you don't see and I fear Allah. Well, he runs away from the angels. What kind, he's a weak old man with no power, no ability. He's just a weak old man with too many children. That is the reality of Iblis. And make light to them. Don't make them feel like, if you start panicking, they are definitely going to start panicking. And a lot of people do this. The child starts shaking and it's like, okay, panic time. Parents start panicking. Raqi starts panicking because it's a child. And the child obviously starts panicking. And what I'll sometimes do is say, silly jinn. And it stops. Oh, okay, it's not a big deal. It's a small, the child feels it's very light. It's not a big deal. And you don't push them too much. As in all cases, if the jinn speaks, do not engage the jinn in conversation. I have rules about when the jinn speaks. Number 1, do not engage the jinn in conversation. Number 2, do not engage the jinn in conversation. And number 3, do not engage the jinn in conversation. That is a summary of my rules when the jinn speaks. Why? First of all, it's like having conversation with somebody who's not all entirely there, yeah? And second of all, they never tell you anything of benefit. And the danger in it is that you will end up doing something for them or following them. What I usually say to them is, if the jinn speaks, I will say, and says, I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do that to you. I've got a couple of methods. One, if you are hafidh of the Quran or you've memorized a lot of the Quran, only respond to them with the Quran. So if he says, I will kill you, then say, kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Every soul will taste death. Or say, وَلَنْ يُؤَخِّرَ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهَا. When the time for a person to die comes, Allah will not delay their, time to come. Or say to them, فَقَضِ مَا أَنْتَ قَاضٍ إِنَّمَا تَقَضِي هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Like the magician said to Fir'aun, do whatever you like, because whatever you're going to do to me is only in the dunya. But don't start replying with your own speech, because you're taking away from the ruqyah. When you reply with the Quran, you're still doing ruqyah, you're still reciting the Quran. So I recite the whole ayah. I'll recite the whole ayah in response to them. If they laugh, I'll recite the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, فَلْيَضْحَكُوا قَلِيلًا وَلْيَبْكُوا كَثِيرًا جَزَاءً بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Let them laugh a lot and let them laugh a little and cry a lot as a recompense for what they used to do. So you try to reply to them with the Quran. If you can't reply to them with the Quran, then don't reply to them at all. And even when you can, don't reply to them too much. Just say to them, fear Allah and leave. And they say, yeah, but I came and I can tell you about this is going to happen and the Dajjal, and I say, yeah, whatever, leave. Fear Allah and leave, and then recite your own. You're going back to Al-Falaq and-Nas, go back to Al-Falaq and-Nas, half an hour. The jinn is saying, but, like someone who's raising their hand, I'll tell you, I'll go. Don't listen to them. Don't even tolerate them. What you do is people will say, the jinn will be like, I'm going to go, I'm going to leave. And someone will say, okay, all right, you're going to leave. Right, let's do this. Bismillah. This is the most foolish thing you can do. Just keep reading. Let's read Falaq and Nas. I leave. Sometimes after 15 minutes, I'll say, okay, go. No, first I want. Right, here we go again. Al-Falaq, Al-Nas, Fatiha, Baqarah, again. And next time, I don't wait 15 minutes to talk. I wait half an hour. All that half an hour, they are saying to me, I'm going to go. I'm not interested. If you wanted to go, you'll go. If you wanted to go, you would go. So then again, they'll say, I want to go, but I don't know how. This is, they'll throw all sorts of things. Say, I don't know how. Say, okay, I will teach you how. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. This will teach them very, very, very quickly how to leave. They will suddenly remember. Keep going. When you engage in the conversation with them, they're just taking a break, taking a breather from the ruqyah, and making you waste your time. They will tell you all sorts of stories. I'll tell you where the magic is. I know a brother, jinn told him, said, I will tell you where the magic is. I'm ready to go. I will give you everything. Let me tell you where it is. I told the brother, don't listen to the jinn. Don't believe them. If they wanted to tell you where the magic is, they would go and tell it and scream it out and not give this whole, I'll tell you where it is, I promise. So I'll tell you where it is. Okay, fine. You tell me where it is. So he says, where is it? He says, it's in your garden in your country abroad. Which country you come from? Abroad. It's in your garden. So he went and he dug up the garden, and he went to the exact same spot where the jinn had said the magic was, and guess what? Nothing is there. He goes back to the jinn, and the jinn just cackled, laughed out loud and went, I lied. And that's the reality of them. صَدَقَكَ وَهُوَ كَذُوب. He told you the truth, but he is the biggest liar. Shaitan. That is the shaitan. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say, if you're going to tell me where it is, you're going to tell me where it is, and I'm not going to ask you to tell me where it is because I don't need you. Alimul ghaybi wa shahada, who knows everything on the heavens and the earth, knows fine well where it is. So I'm in no need of you to tell me where it is. So again, I'm very different in this. A lot of people who do ruqyah will say, yeah, find out, go there, go here. I'm not saying don't look, but don't stop the ruqyah session to go and dig up your garden because the jinn is just laughing at you and saying, hey, look at this guy, look, he's digging up his garden now, we'll tell him, actually, it's not in the garden, it's in the tree. Watch him climb to the top of the tree, fall out of the tree again. And the jinn are just loving it. It's just entertainment for them. Don't be so easily moved. At the end of the day, keep reading, read your own thing. If you have to reply sometimes, they really get to you, sometimes they just really get to you, and they just really wind you up. In which case, sometimes you reply with the Quran, and that is sufficient, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. There isn't a best time, we're still on the topic of the children, there isn't one best time to perform ruqyah, but if you notice that symptoms are bad at a certain time, it's better for children, and for adults, but especially for children, that you recite on children at the time when their symptoms are worse. So for example, if they have a nightmare at 3 a.m., I would recommend that you set your alarm for 2:45, you get up, pray 2 rak'ah or whatever, because whenever you get up at night, it's a good habit to be into, and you sit with the child and you read over them while they're having the episode, as opposed to, if the child has the episode at Maghrib every day, it's very common in ruqyah problems, every day at Maghrib, read on them at that time. Because with children, the jinn, and I don't know why this happens, I don't know the answer to everything, and I definitely don't know the answer to, all the topics of ruqyah. I don't know why this happens, but it seems with a lot of children that the jinn seem to distance themselves with the children at certain times and be nearer to them at certain times. So you'll see some children who, between Maghrib and Isha, they're going crazy, and every other time there's no reaction to the ruqyah at all. Now that doesn't mean the ruqyah is not benefiting, it benefits at all times, including after Isha, including after Fajr and whatever, but if you want, sort of really get to the heart of the matter, then probably you want to read on them when their symptoms are worse if there is a particular time. But do be willing to change the time and the method depending on progress, and don't change too quickly. One problem people have in ruqyah is again that they change their opinions too quickly. They form opinions too quickly and they change their opinions too quickly. What do we mean by that? You've read the ayat of magic, nothing much happened, okay, no magic here, let's go on to evil eye. You read evil eye, nothing, and you're just letting the jinn lead you in the ruqyah session. Never, ever, ever let the jinn lead you. You are the one responsible, in charge of the ruqyah session. You control it. Don't let the jinn tell you when to start. Don't let the jinn tell you when to stop. And definitely don't let the jinn change your symptoms from one thing to another, or ideas from one thing to another, and just be random. Everyone does it. You start reading and the jinn says, something like, I'm just about to go and kill your only son, or something ridiculous like that. And at that point, what do you want to do? You get angry, you stop your ruqyah, you start talking to them, and before you know, your ruqyah session is gone. And all they wanted to do is just distract you and take you away from it. You control the ruqyah session. You read as long as you want to read. Then when you want to address that statement from them later on, after 15 minutes or half an hour, you can stop and you can say, regarding what you said to me, this and this and this. But don't allow them to dictate to you when you start and when you stop, and don't allow them to control you and manipulate you into making certain decisions and choices. Beware, your nafs has a bias, and the jinn play on that bias that is in your nafs by getting you to sort of, I've changed my opinion, I've been doing ruqyah 45 minutes a day for 3 days, didn't work, so now I've started doing it 30 minutes a day, or I've started doing it like this. Don't change so quickly. Be consistent and be regular, and we mentioned this in the last episode. So now I'm going to come on to the topic of violent jinn, and I'm not sure, I'm guessing this will be our last topic before we break for Jumu'ah, because it's already 11:34, so I'm kind of thinking that it might be our last topic. I'll let the guys from Kalemah give me a shout once we've got just 5 minutes left. How do we control a violent jinn? So this might be something I mentioned in the last workshop, but I think it's appropriate here because it's a specialized thing. Most cases of jinn possession are not violent. And if you go in with your mind expecting them to be violent, the shaitan will make you scared, and you will get very, very scared. And I remember whenever I feel scared, I kind of make myself go and do it. And I remember I read on a brother, lovely, lovely brother, but this brother is like, his arms are like, size of my legs, he's like a massive big guy, yeah? Very, very, very strong. One of those guys when he shakes your hand that he just crushes your hand. And like he tells me I've got this really big ruqyah problem, and it's violent. So my first reaction is, no way, I'm not doing that, yeah? And then I stopped myself and I said, no, this is wrong. This is letting the shaitan overcome my trust in Allah. It's letting the shaitan dictate to me who does and doesn't get ruqyah. And at the end of the day, I think of it this way, most likely the jinn are stronger than he is. But at the end of the day, it's not strength of arm or strength of muscle that is going to win you, give you victory in a ruqyah session, but it's strength of iman and strength of sabr and so on and so forth. So I went and I read on him by myself on my own. And alhamdulillah, it was absolutely fine. I wouldn't go and read on him on my own if I had a choice, because I always bring a ruqyah partner with me whenever I can. It's just good practice to have someone with you. But I went and read on him on his own, and alhamdulillah, nothing happened. Nothing at all. The jinn came, we had the, jinn stuff going on, ruqyah was going on, but there was no danger to me at all, and he was not, excessively violent. And that brings me to something that is really important that you have to understand. If a ruqyah patient is going to be violent, 99% of the time, they're going to be violent against themselves, not against you. Their biggest risk is to themselves. And some of you in this room know, you've been in ruqyah sessions to me where we've had a violent jinn, and you've witnessed that. And you've witnessed that in general, the problem is mostly to the patient themselves. It's very rare that they're going to go for your neck. It does happen, but it's very, very rare that they're going to go for your neck. Mostly, they will try to hurt themselves. So, you will get a lot of noise when you deal with the jinn. You will get, in a lot of cases, maybe 50% of cases, you'll get screaming, shouting, kicking, hitting the sofa, and those kind of things. Don't worry about them. It's not violence, it's just, it's just noise, okay? What I'm talking about is a really genuinely violent case where the person is physically willing to hurt themselves or hurt you or hurt their family members. When you're dealing with this kind of issue, then I think that the first thing you have to bear in mind is your protection comes from Allah. It doesn't come from how strong you are, it doesn't come from how well prepared you are, although that has an element to it because it's an element of tawakkul. But at the end of the day, your strength comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not a particularly strong guy, I don't win very many people in an arm wrestle, but I will quite happily wrestle somebody with a major jinn problem who is twice the size of me to the ground, no problem at all. At the end of the day, I'm not strong, it's not my expertise, I can't, do a lot of chin-ups or whatever it is that people do to prove that they're really strong, or press-ups or whatever. But at the end of the day, you realize that it's Allah who gives you strength. And it's not you. You are not strong. Even if you come in and you're like, I can handle this, I can wrestle the jinn to the ground like Umar, radiallahu an. The reality is that it was the iman of Umar and not the muscular strength of Umar, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And that's what, at the end of the day, you've got to go back to. Your sin is your greatest danger at this time. The greatest danger that this guy is going to strangle you to death is your sin and not your lack of muscular ability to actually, wrestle them or whatever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-qawi, al-mateen, the most strong, the most powerful. If He protects you, there is nobody that can harm you. And I say that to you, and I think most of you understand it, but I don't think you really witness it until you see it. Until you see this huge creature come and literally try to throttle you, and you just go, and they fall to the ground. That is when it really hits home that it's not you, it's only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, don't try to overpower the jinn through strength. A lot of brothers make this mistake. Not a lot of sisters make this mistake, but a lot of brothers make this mistake. They see themselves as being pretty strong, and they try to sort of wrestle the jinn. And I remember something that happened to me, and it was quite significant. It happened to me is I went to read on a brother who had a history of being very violent towards the raqi. So they told me, before you go in, he's chewed up like 3 raqis before, yeah? Before you go in, this guy has a history. I said, Yalla, Bismillah. So we went in, and we started reciting for him, and I made a big mistake. He wrestled with me, and I thought, fine, I'll wrestle with him back. And at the end of the day, when you've been doing a bit of ruqyah, after a while, this ruqyah partner of mine is very, very good at these kind of things, like wrestling and restraining people and whatever. So he taught me a few things, and I thought, yeah, I can do it. Yeah, Bismillah. And I said Bismillah. I trusted in Allah that it's Allah, it's from Allah. I'm going to trust in Allah. And he went to get hold of my arms or something, and so I did the whole turning his body weight and all this stuff. In the end, I just got absolutely just floored by him, yeah. And then I stopped trying to overpower him and started focusing only on the Quran, and he became as soft as like a baby lamb. And he said to me afterwards, if you had carried on like that, I would have killed you. And I don't know that's true, but that's what he said to me. He said, if you had carried on like that, I would have killed you, because you had takabbur. You had pride, and you thought you were powerful enough to overpower me. And when you humbled yourself, and you started to focus on the Quran, I could not overpower you. And again, that's coming from the shaitan, so you have to have a little bit of a caveat on that he's not the most truthful person. But I saw that in myself. I saw that I was trying the wrong way. I didn't feel I had a lot of pride, but I felt like I was, I can do this. Bismillah, trust in Allah, I can get him on the ground. And in the end of the day, I nearly got myself in a very dangerous and difficult situation because I forgot that you don't overpower them with muscular strength. But with the Quran, and it's not like your iman is so high, you overpower them with the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that nothing can stand in its way. Don't just think about your own safety, but also think about the patient's safety. Again, I see this as being a major problem. Most people are thinking of themselves. So what they'll do is the jinn goes violent, they run out of the room. But that poor guy is probably going, and I've had people take kitchen knives, and they won't take the kitchen knife on me, they'll take the kitchen knife straight for the neck. And that is the time when you're a pretty cowardly person if you run out of the room. You need to realize that person's life is in danger, and you need to deal with it in the right way. And the right way is not to grab their arm and do some sort of like crazy move. The right way is just to get near to them, get something in the way, khudh akhd al-asbab, and blow and read over them until the jinn is subdued, and then make a mental note not to do ruqyah in the kitchen. Again, yeah. I'm honest about it. Think where you do ruqyah. Think what will happen if the patient falls over and bangs their head. Will they cut their head on a marble tile? Will they smash their head off will they take a knife from the kitchen? Will they take a glass and throw the glass on your head? Think about it. Do ruqyah in a place where it's sensible and safe. Most cases will give you no problem. Most cases will just be noise, shouting and screaming. You have nothing to worry about. Sometimes you get the odd one. I maybe get what? Violent jinn? 1 in 30 maybe? 1 in 30, not very common that I get like a really violent one. And even then, like truly violent, 1 in 100 maybe. Like real, where I really feel my life is in danger, I need 1 in 100 maybe more than that. Or maybe actually less than that, I should say. Don't allow the jinn to intimidate you. The jinn learn habits based on your reaction. If every time they go like that, you go like that, yeah, they will have a field day with you. They will just intimidate you. They will wind you up. They will make you scared. You put your foot down and you teach them the negative consequences of bad behavior. That means if they hit out at you, you take their hand and you blow on it for a good 10, 15 minutes so that they learn, next time I do that, there's going to be a negative consequence for me. And they'll soon learn that shouting and screaming and violence don't help. If you are struggling, keep some ruqyah water in a spray bottle. Sometimes in like what you water plants with. It's very useful. Just give them a spray in the face, and that will usually calm them down, but not for everybody, but for some it will calm them down. Generally have a ruqyah partner. At the end of the day, it's not cowardly, it's sensible. It's al-akhd bil-asbab, doing the causes of success. Have a ruqyah partner who will be there to help you safely restrain the person. It's not that I can't restrain them. It's that I can't restrain them safely where me and them are both safe and comfortable. But with another person, I can quite comfortably manage the situation in a way that they're safe and they're comfortable. And my biggest concern is always the patient, that they're going to harm themselves, punch themselves. I have a lot of cases people punch themselves in the head, hit their head off a wall, find a glass and try and smash the glass on their own head. Those are the things that are the biggest concern. You come last of all. Like at the end of the day, as a Raqi, you come last of all, and it's very rare that the jinn will ever go out for you. And it doesn't hurt to learn some safe methods of comfortably restraining someone in a way that is safe for them and safe for you. It doesn't hurt that. It's not perfect, but at the end of the day, knowing how to safely stop a person from hitting themselves in the head is probably pretty reasonable, and it's a reasonable thing to do. You're talking about sort of just, get someone who knows this kind of thing, who's got a bit of experience in this, to just give you some tips on how to safely stop a person from, doing something to hurt themselves. So, safely sort of just like restraining somebody or safely just holding them in their seat where they can't get up. And a friend of mine taught me a few things, and since then I felt it helped me really in my ruqyah. I felt that the patient was safer, because before they would run up and I would kind of rugby tackle them down to the ground, and that wasn't very safe for them because they could fall, hit their head, I could fall, a lot of things could happen. And later on, he sort of told me just keep some pressure on the shoulders on both sides. Don't let them get their body weight behind themselves and push you up. And that's a lot safer than rugby tackling somebody to the ground. So, if you can learn a few small things to do to just keep it safer, then that's pretty good. If you still can't manage and you really fear for yourself, you've got no choice but to leave in the best way that you can. At the end of the day, if that happens, you do your best. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And at the end of the day, if you can't handle it, then at the end of the day, don't put yourself in harm. So you have to, you've got no choice. You have to leave. But do make dua for the patient that Allah Azza wa Jal helps them. And one thing I always tell people is do be extremely cautious regarding physically restraining a patient, because in most countries, ruqyah is not a recognized form of treatment, and you putting your hand on someone's head and pushing them down into the ground is probably a criminal offense and probably will get you arrested. So be careful. In some countries, ruqyah is just cool. In pretty much in Saudi, you can do whatever you like. Probably here in a ruqyah center, you can pretty much do whatever you like. But definitely, definitely in somewhere like the UK, if I take someone and twist their arm behind their back, that's, at the end of the day, that's, whatever it is, battery or assault or something like that. So you've got to be really careful that, you do things in a safe way. And most patients, if you just leave them some safe space on the carpet, they'll flap around a bit and they won't hurt anybody. That's what I usually do. Like if I see a patient's getting a bit agitated, help them to sit down on the floor, put a pillow under their head, and just let them, let them flap around on the floor a little bit, and they'll be just fine, inshallah. When they stand up and say, I'm going to kill you, and run at you with their arms out, that's when you need to sort of think about some action. But when that happens, I always used to say to my ruqyah partner, when that has ever happened to me, it's been because of bad practice on my part. If it ever gets to the point where the guy's got his hands around my neck, then that is me not doing my job properly, because I never should have allowed that situation to get to that point. He should have been safely kept in a safe place. And again, some of you have seen, sometimes I do ruqyah and I just think, oh man, I didn't prepare that. They run for the door, they start shaking the door, and I think, I didn't prepare that well. I should have prepared that better. I should have looked and said, where is a safe space for them to be? Where should I stand to stop them running to the door? Or where should I stand to stop them getting to the kitchen knife? And have yourself a sensible plan. The conclusion of that, before we break, is literally just that violent jinn are very, very, very rare, but with a few simple steps, you can save yourself from the majority of the problems. Go with a ruqyah partner, make sure you plan the event first, make sure you don't allow it to escalate too far. Before it turns into a boxing match, just make sure that they're safely, just gently sat down, don't hurt the patient, make sure they don't hurt themselves, and those basic points that we mentioned in this little segment. So that is another sort of specialized ruqyah. It rarely happens, and I don't think it's a big deal, but as soon as you get yourself scared and say, right, I'm only going to handle very small people, the reality is the jinn inside of them might not be a very small person, and you might be doing ruqyah on a 5-year-old child who just picks you up and throws you across the room, so you never know when that might happen. Be prepared and be safe, and you'll be absolutely fine, inshallah. And I can honestly say, maybe in all of this 10 years, I've had 5 really bad experiences. Maybe less, maybe 3 to 5 really bad experiences, but all of them have been my fault. All of them have been when I've recognized that I didn't handle the situation properly, and I didn't watch and I didn't follow my own rules. So that's my conclusion. Okay, inshallah, we're going to make a start. I apologize for getting you guys nice and early after food, but I have this long list before I even start your questions. I have this huge long list of issues to go through. I have at least 15 more slides, if you like, or issues to deal with you with before we even start with the questions. The reason I don't start with the questions first is actually because I think a lot of your questions may be answered during the presentation, inshallah. So what I want to do is, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, is to go over a few basics again, cover some stuff, and then we can move on from there. Okay, I got a case study to wake you guys up. All right. So this case study is that a brother or a sister comes to you and says to you that we have been trying for a baby for many, many years. We've had IVF treatment. We've had, been to various doctors and we've got nowhere. What do you advise us to do? Do we need ruqyah? And if so, what sort of ruqyah should we do? And this is my question to you. What would you advise them? Based on some of the things we've said, I'm looking for principles. I'm not really looking for the right answer, but some basic principles. Where do you start? What would you start with? Okay, go for it. Okay, start with Tawheed. Very good. I like that answer. I would start with Tawheed. What element of Tawheed would you start with as it relates to trying for a baby? If you have an answer for me, I'll take it from the same brother, since you gave me such a good answer. Very good. So this is our first point, and I'm going to go to the sisters for the second point. That the very, very first point is that children are a blessing from Allah. And you need to recognize that the only way you're going to be able to successfully conceive is if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you with a child. And what you're doing is you're erasing and you're preparing the ground to make it fertile for the idea to spread within the person, erasing any sort of ideas that might be shirk, going to any sort of funny places, doing any strange things, and so on and so forth. So the first thing is Tawheed, and children come from Allah. And I'll read you the first part of my answer. The first part of my answer is to quote to them the ayah, to Allah belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. He creates whatever He wills. He gives to whom He wills female children, and He gives to whom He wills males. Or He gives both males and females, and He renders barren whom He wills. Indeed, He is the all-knower and the able to do all things. So the first thing you need to recognize is that Allah alone has the power to give you this. Very good. That's our first point of call. Where might we go next on the sisters' side? Maybe I can ask one of the Kalemah volunteers just to pick one of the sisters to save me sort of looking over there. I'll ask one of the Kalemah volunteers just to pick one of the sisters, inshallah. It's okay to get it wrong now, because we're only doing it as a trial, as a little test for ourselves. We got the first thing, Tawheed, children come from Allah, nowhere else. Very good. What's our next point?
Ask them about if they are doing the obligations, like they are praying.
I missed that slightly, sister. If you could repeat that to me again.
We'll ask them if they are praying 5 times.
Very good. Really good. We start asking them about themselves. And there's a couple of elements to this. Now, it's not about probing into the person's life, but you want to find out a bit about the person and where they might be. Because the mufti, not that we are muftun, but the person giving the fatwa in a general sense, has to know hal al-mustafti, the situation of the person who is asking the question. So is this person, from what you can see, practicing Islam? Could they potentially have gone to a magician or a fortune teller, or have they got a ta'weez? These are all things that you will judge based on looking at them and based on asking some intelligent questions. So something like, what sort of things have you done before to maybe treat this? Have you tried treating it through any Islamic means? That's a good generic question where they can throw up, I've been to, Pir Sahib and he gave me this. So this is like, you probably don't want to say, have you been to a magician? Because they'll probably say no. But saying to them, have you had any Islamic treatment done? I've done this. What about any family members? Have they sought treatment for you? Has your mother gone to the same guy and got a ta'weez for you or something like that? So you just sort of start to find out about them, and what the sister said is spot on about the praying 5 times a day. Is the person praying? And where do you see this person is in terms of their state? Okay, so we've talked about about Tawheed, Allah is the only one, and we've talked about the situation of the person and maybe looking at any sort of sins that you could correct, any issues of, issues of what you might call sort of obstacles in terms of a religious sense. What would you then start to advise them with? We'll go back to the brother's side. What would your next sort of step as a Raqi be?
Start to do tawbah.
Okay, good. So we've got sort of like this issue of tawbah coming in there. And particularly with regard to having children. We all know the statement of Nuh, فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا وَيُمْدِدْكُمْ بِأَمْوَالٍ وَبَنِينَ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ جَنَّاتٍ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ أَنْهَارًا. I said to them, seek forgiveness from your Lord. Indeed, He is the ever forgiving. He will send down rain from the sky or repeatedly. He will send it time and time again, rain down from the sky, and He will give you an increase in wealth and in children. So anybody who says to you, wealth problem, child problem, straight away, and this is the point I really wanted to hammer home here, which is actually, I'm using this case study for a reason, is that don't limit your solution to Ruqyah alone. Too many people who do Ruqyah, the way they deal with it is, their solution is, someone comes and says, I can't have a child, okay, read this, drink this, put this on your body. And what we need to be is much more holistic than that, much more wide than that. Talking to them about prayer, about dua, about getting near to Allah, about istighfar, about tawbah. Does anyone know a dua that you could recommend them to frequently make? The dua of which prophet? Zakaria. وَزَكَرِيَّا إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْنِي فَرْدًا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ فاستجبنا له ووهبنا له يحيى وأصلحنا له زوجه إنهم كانوا يسارعون في الخيرات ويدعوننا رغبا ورهبا وكانوا لنا خاشعين. This ayah has so many benefits from it in Surah Al-Anbiya. And I'm just going to give you a few. I really don't have time. I'm going to give you a few. Zakaria, when he called out to his Lord, my Lord, do not leave me without a child. Fardan, alone without a child, and you are the best of al-warithin, the best of the inheritors. And I put my trust in you, and the best, if I pass away at the end of the day, my good deeds and my hopes and my dreams are all attached to you. Give me a child. And Allah says, so we answered him, فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. And we gave him Yahya, and we made his wife fertile again, like able to conceive again. And then this is the most important part of the ayah. إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. They used to rush to do good deeds and race each other to do good deeds. وَيَدْعُونَنَا رَغَبًا وَرَهَبًا, and called upon us in dua, in fear and hope. وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ, and they were humbly submissive to us. And if anyone comes to you and says to you, my ruqyah is not working, read this ayah. Because wallahi, this is one of the ayat that if you understand it, it has the miftah, the key that will open for you the door of a cure in ruqyah. إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ وَيَدْعُونَنَا رَغَبًا وَرَهَبًا وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ. If you can be like this, Allah will answer you like He answered Zakaria. If you can race one another to do good deeds, if you can call upon Allah and never be negligent in your dua. What did Zakaria say in the beginning of Surah Maryam? وَهَنَ الْعَظْمُ مِنِّي وَاشْتَعَلَ الرَّأْسُ شَيْبًا وَلَمْ أَكُمْ بِدُعَاءِ رَبِّي شَقِيًّا. Sorry, came out of my mind. That he said that I have not been negligent in my dua to you. I have not been negligent in my dua to you. And that is how you get answered. Don't be negligent, don't be, shaqi. It can have a lot of meanings, like don't feel wretched, hopeless, and like that you have turned away from Allah. It was not like that towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all. So you see how this, racing to do good deeds, calling upon Allah, having this khushu and this khashya, and being scared of Allah and being worried about the akhirah, this is how you get a cure. And I always advise people, just look at, and I have a lesson for you in all of the 3 du'as that are mentioned in Surah Al-Anbiya in this page. Ayyub, wa Ayyuba idh nada rabbahu, anni massani ad-dur, wa anta arhamur rahimin, fastajabna lahu. وآتيناه أهله ومثلهم معهم رحمة من عندنا وذكرى للعابدين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Ayyub, and Ayyub when he called upon his Lord, that I have been afflicted by a hardship. What was the hardship Ayyub was afflicted by? He lost his children, he lost his family, but specifically in the Quran, there is a lesson for us in Ruqyah. He says, Massani ash-shaytan. The shaytan has afflicted me. Binusbin wa adab. The shaytan has afflicted me with this affliction, this torment. And this is an evidence that some of the scholars mentioned that the level of piety that you have does not stop you being tested as a trial from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regard to the jinn and the shayateen. Because it happened to Ayyub, and it happened to our messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he was afflicted by the magic of Labid ibn al-A'sam. So don't feel that because, of course, your piety, your taqwa, your dua, all of this is a protection. But sometimes Allah will test you with something like He tested Ayyub and like He tested our messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And this is one of the evidences that just doing your adhkar and being really sort of steadfast in terms of Islam doesn't mean that you won't sometimes have a battle with the shaitan from a place to a place or a time to a time. Allah Azza wa Jal answered Ayyub. He gave him his family and like the same number of them again, as a mercy from Allah and a reminder to the worshippers. A reminder to us, a dhikra for us to remember what happens when you call upon Allah and when you remain patient in your situation. And then you come to the dua of Yunus. وَذَنُّونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا فَظَنَّ أَنْ لَا نَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. So, first of all, Yunus, he became angry, and he left in a state of sort of emotion. His emotions got the better of him. He left in that state, and he thought that we would not be able to, or we would not be able to touch him, was not that he thought ill of Allah. Abadan, this is not possible from a prophet, but that he thought he was not doing anything wrong. And he thought that it was not something Allah would punish him for. And I think this is the safer opinion with regard to the tafsir, so that we don't end up saying something about the Anbiya and the Rusul which is not appropriate. So at the end of the day, he thought that he would not be punished by Allah. He thought that Allah would not punish him for leaving, because he thought that his people had rejected him and he was the same as Noah. That they've rejected me, they've left me, and so he left. And we know the prophets are protected from the major sins. They make mistakes, small mistakes and errors of judgment in their best effort, but they don't fall into the major sins. So this was an error of judgment and not an open disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of, let me just ignore everything Allah has said to me. Never, hasha wa kalla. This cannot be from a prophet. So he went out, he thought that he would not be taken to account for it, and then he called out when he was thrown into the sea and he was swallowed by the fish. He called out in the darkness, La ilaha illa anta subhanak, inni kuntu min al-zalimin. There is no God worthy of worship but you, subhanaka, you are free of all imperfections. Indeed, I have been oppressive or from the oppressors. And what did Allah say? And this is the key thing, that we sometimes remember the dua, but we don't remember what Allah said. Allah said, فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. We answered him. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْغَمِّ. And we saved him from his sadness. وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And for me, this last part is the key. And we promise to save every believer who does the same. A promise from Allah Azza wa Jal that He will save you if you do the same. So for sure, it's about dua, general supplications, dua of Zakaria, I've got that in my list. So I mean, I've got take yourself to account, seek forgiveness from Allah, focus on prayers and daily remembrance, supplicate with both general supplications like La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minal zalimin, and specific supplications like the dua of Zakaria, Rabbi la tadharni fardan wa anta khayrul warithin. And observe the etiquette of dua. What else from the non-ruqyah side might you want to advise them? From the non-ruqyah side, before we even get to ruqyah. I've got 2 more points. Okay, charity, very good. I mean, basic principle, the Prophet ﷺ said, Dawu murdakum bis-sadaqa. Treat your sick people with charity. So for sure, charity is something you can advise people to do, these general good deeds and generally increasing in obedience to Allah. Is there anything with regard to children specifically outside of ruqyah that you might want to advise them? Yeah, that's possible. Like that's on the medical side, going down the medical route, definitely. That is possible.
You can make dua for someone who's having similar kind of problem.
Okay, that's another point. You can make dua on the topic of dua. You can make dua for someone who's having a similar problem that the angel says Ameen and to you. These are all completely valid. I'll tell you the couple that I had left, and I apologize to the sisters. Sometimes I get caught up in saying to you, and then I forget about the sisters. So, follow the proper etiquette of marital intimacy. This is one that I had on the list. Because at the end of the day, what do you say, when a person is intimate with their wife? So they say that, oh Allah, keep the shaitan away from us. Allahumma jannibna shaitan, wa jannib shaitan ma razaqtana. What does that tell you about people who don't observe that etiquette? If you're in that etiquette are saying, oh Allah, keep shaitan away from me and keep shaitan away from what you provide us, what might happen if you don't make that dua? By mafhum al-mukhalafa, the shaitan comes near to you and the shaitan starts causing you problems for you and your children. So definitely the proper etiquettes in terms of not doing anything haram, in terms of making that particular dhikr, and so on and so forth. That's very, very important because the sunnah brings barakah. And the other thing that I had on my list, and it's not an exhaustive list, is gratitude to Allah and having the intention for being grateful. Because you remember the story in the Quran of those two that were hoping for a child, and they were praying for a child, and then when Allah gave them the child, they made for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala partners in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had gave them. And I'm trying to remember the surah off the top of my head, but in any case, this is a clear proof that you have to be grateful and have an intention to be grateful. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are grateful, I will give you more. So these are just a few points before we even get into ruqyah. Because I always tell the brothers and the sisters, if your job is just to read people on people, you're nothing more than a glorified MP3 player. That is basically what you are. And that's not what I want you to be. I want you to be du'at. I want you to be calling people to the good. If you see the person's not praying, how can you read on them and then just let them go and not pray? Give them the advice. Start them to pray. Start them to get near to Allah. Let them consider the holistic problem and not only ruqyah. Then when we got to ruqyah, first thing I said is the means of protection. So I usually start with people, before you even start ruqyah, start protecting yourself. So I have a long article called How to Protect Myself, or How Do I Protect Myself, including adhkar, abandoning sins, following the sunnah, all of these type of things. And then talking about, start with the 7-day ruqyah program, try that for a little while. If you do it once a month and things are not improving within 2-3 months, maybe go on to the full ruqyah program and see if we are seeing any change in you or any symptoms that might make us think that it's not a natural cause. And this pretty much exact program I've sent to more than one couple, and I found that in general it seems to be doing the job. It seems to be working, alhamdulillah, that people are, you give people more than just ruqyah. And that's what I really wanted to teach you. It's not so much the answer to this question, but as much as the principle of give them more than ruqyah. If you just give them ruqyah, you're really limiting yourself and you're really limiting them. And how do you know the problem is from the jinn and the shaitan. What makes you think that the problem might not be, for example, from their sins or their disobedience to Allah, or their problem might not be one of a lack of sabr, or their problem might not be, for example, any of the other issues that we mentioned, a lack of following the sunnah and etiquettes when it comes to marriage. There are lots and lots of reasons. So while there are lots and lots of reasons, don't give someone one treatment for one reason. Give them the whole spectrum of treatment. From tawbah, educate them how to make tawbah, to educating them how to trust in Allah, to educating them as to how to live as husband and wife, a good book on marital etiquettes and marital sort of intimacies, there's some good literature you can give them that will help them to understand that. Likewise on the topic of ruqyah, and you give them the whole thing. Why? Because basically if you cover all of your bases, bi-idhnillah, the cure will come from here or from here or from here or from here. But you're giving them everything. Whereas when you give them just ruqyah is an amazing thing and it's a comprehensive cure for everything. But you are neglecting the possibility that this is coming from sins, a lack of istighfar, and so on and so forth. So now, when I come to tell you, and I'll just sort of give you an idea, what I tend to tell people about things like financial problems. So the same thing and the same method applies when it comes to financial issues. This is my most common query, I must admit. I think at the moment, in the last year or so, my most common query is probably, or one of my most common queries is, I lost my job, I've lost everything, I can't make any money, or I can't get married, or I can't like sort of financial and life problems. Not people saying I twitch at night, or I float through the air, or I have like nightmares, or I faint when I hear the Quran. Most people are saying things like job problems, money problems, business problems, and marriage problems and whatever. And again, I follow the same methodology. Do not discount ruqyah because it may well be the evil eye. You know what the Prophet ﷺ, how much he emphasized the evil eye, and how much the evil eye will afflict so many people of this ummah. To the extent that perhaps the majority of the people who will be afflicted with something will be afflicted by the evil eye, or the evil eye will be a component. So you can't ignore that. But at the same time, there are lots and lots of reasons why a person might find themselves in financial difficulty. And that can range from it being a test of their sabr, a sin that they have done, haram earnings, things like oppression towards other people. And there's a beautiful lecture series that I give to everybody who comes to me with this problem. Pretty much, I give them this lecture series by our Sheikh Zafar Al-Hassan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, in the Urdu language, but it has a brief set of notes available in English called Means to Increase Your Earnings or something like that. And I think Kalemah has the DVD outside. But why do I give this to people if I think it's a ruqyah problem? Because imagine you hit this from multiple angles. The person starts repenting to Allah. They start purifying their wealth. They start looking at their amana and whether they are fulfilling it. They start looking at their truthfulness. They start looking at things like whether they are stingy, whether they are giving sadaqah. They start looking at things like the source of their income and how they spend it. They start looking at their dua. They start looking at their trust in Allah. And soon enough, you have this huge sort of spectrum of activity, of which ruqyah is one part of it. And that way, you're pretty much hitting the problem from every possible angle. So I summarize the notes of the Shaykh on a sheet of paper, and basically I tend to go through it and say, right, let's look at this issue. Let's look at your amanat. Are you fulfilling your amana to the people? Or are you losing the amana so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tried you in your wealth? For example, what about your prayers? What about your honesty? What about istighfar? فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ, the same ayah that we mentioned before, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيُمْدِدُكُمْ بِأَمْوَالٍ وَبَنِينَ, with wealth and children, and all of the other ayat and the ahadith that mention wealth, about being good to your parents, your rizq being dependent on birrul walidain, and all of these aspects that we look at, and we try to deliver for a person a holistic solution to the problem. And sometimes people don't like it. I'll be honest, sometimes people are like, look, I just want the ruqyah, like just read on me. But the reality is that what you're doing is you're trying to do a number of things. Number one, let's just presume it is a ruqyah problem. And some of them come and it's clearly a ruqyah problem. They have an instant reaction to the Quran and they have terrible business and problems and whatever. What we always tell them is that by dealing with this from the point of view of rizq and increasing it and removing the obstacles, you are removing the hold the shaitan has in you to be able to make this magic or this jinn possession or this evil eye effective. It's only effective while it has a hold on you. And while you're removing this, you're becoming like a smooth, stone or piece of glass. Everything is just falling off. And so the shaitan isn't able to affect. Remember, the shaitan doesn't control your rizq. Your rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the first thing we tell everybody. Just like we tell people that Allah is the one who gives you children, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives you rizq. And don't ever think the shaitan can withhold your rizq. Abadan. How can the shaitan withhold your rizq when Allah is ar-Razzaq? It's not possible. Rather, the shaitan is allowed for a wisdom to give you a limited trial for a time as a wisdom from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are means and ways to get out of that problem. So what I would like to see somebody who's suffering financially doing is start looking from an Islamic learning perspective on the means for your rizq to go up and the means for your rizq to be blocked. What can block your rizq? Like lying and being untrustworthy and dishonest, or not having amana, or being stingy, or not helping the poor, or like other sort of what can stop it? Or uquq al-walidain, being bad to your parents. Then what reverse-wise can increase it? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. If the people of the towns believed in Allah and had taqwa, they did the right things and avoided the wrong things, we would open for them the barakah of the heavens and the earth. That's a promise from Allah. Allah didn't say except those who are afflicted by magic or except those who are afflicted by the jinn. Allah promised you, if you believe and have taqwa, He will open for you the barakat of the heavens and the earth. That's a promise from Allah. Inna Allah la yukhliful mi'ad. Allah doesn't break His promise. So we start on that side and then we give them a treatment for the ruqyah as well. So we start with maybe them doing, and again, one of the brothers raised a really good point with me before. He said, where did you get this 45 minutes from? Is this from the sunnah? We said, no, it's not at all from the sunnah. And you're welcome to do 50 or 30 or anything else. Why do I say 45 minutes? I'm looking for something people can do. My Sheikh Ali, he tells them to read Surah Al-Baqarah twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. Sometimes if I phone him and complain about a case, he will say to me, are you reading Al-Baqarah 3 times a day? I say, Sheikh, no. He'll say, it's not enough. Read Al-Baqarah 3 times a day, inshallah, you'll find the cure. So subhanAllah, at the end of the day, I also recognize that, we are weak. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Man was created weak. And if you give people on the first day something they can't handle, like you say to them, right, you'll get rid of your financial problems if you read Surah Al-Baqarah every single day, twice a day, along with your 45 minutes, along with, and people will not be able to do it, then they'll become depressed and they'll start saying, there's no cure for me, there's no rizq for me. I'm just doomed to be like this forever. So give people what is easy. The Prophet ﷺ said, يَسِّرُوا وَلَا تُعَسِّرُوا. يَسِّرُوا وَلَا تُعَسِّرُوا. Make things easy for people, don't make things difficult. So I chose 45 minutes, an arbitrary number. I chose it because it's enough to get the job done, inshallah, but it's little enough that most people can do it. It's a psychological thing. If I said an hour, people would be like, an hour? I don't have an hour. And if I said to people 20 minutes, they might do 10 minutes and stop. But 45 minutes out of pure experience seems to be about the right sort of amount for people to be able to get enough ruqyah done to actually make an effective change with the permission of Allah, and at the same time not be burdening themselves with what they can't do. And likewise, I saw, for example, Sheikh Adil when I met him. And I was just thinking, I probably met Sheikh Adil before the Abu Ibrahim talk. But anyways, when I met Sheikh Adil, I asked him what adhkar he gives people for protection, and he only gave people a handful. And I was like, Sheikh, why don't you give them, like, for example, Hisnul Muslim, and tell them to read the adhkar of Sabah and Masa? He's like, they won't do it. And that's true, that's really, really true. If you gave them Hisnul Muslim and said, read this every morning, wallahi, how many of you, and I believe there are some of you, but I don't believe that all of us in this room read Hisnul Muslim, adhkar Sabah wal Masa every single morning and every single afternoon after Asr without fail. So have at least a handful of du'as that you never miss, and dhikr that you never miss. You know, like certain, I don't know, Bismillah alladhi la yadurru, ma asmihi shay'un fil ardi wala fis sama' wa huwa as-sami'ul alim. These kind of small things that you never ever miss ever. And then build up until you're reading Hisnul Muslim every morning and every afternoon. Inshallah, there's a lot of good in that. So sometimes what I say to people is, I give them the 45 minutes knowing that they really need Surah Al-Baqarah every day, knowing that they need probably Surah Al-Baqarah twice a day. But I give it to them that let's establish a basic principle of ruqyah, then let's ratchet it up. When they come back to me and say, 3 months, I've been doing your 45 minutes strictly, I haven't missed it, I've been doing it with my heart and I'm not getting better, then I say, okay, now you need to read Surah Al-Baqarah every day. Because you bring them up in stages, tadarruj, stages and steps. You don't bring them up in, you don't tell them to just jump to the top of the mountain. You tell them to go up in steps. And that leads me to another point. So on top of the financial side, I give them the regular ruqyah. I don't give them anything specific, but I give them dua for improving their rizq in terms of the du'as that, I've got this website that I helped to make, which is du'as.com, duas.com. And that has a lot of authentic du'as on there. For example, this du'a, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan wa a'udhu bika min al-bukhli aw min al-ajzi wal-kasal wa a'udhu bika min al-bukhli wal-jubn wa a'udhu bika min dala'i ad-dayn wa qahri ar-rijal or min dala'i ad-dayn wa ghalabat ar-rijal. So this is a du'a advised by the Prophet ﷺ for someone who is in debt. And he said that if you say this du'a, your debt will be paid. So subhanAllah, there are certain du'as that we also give them, but we don't give them any specific ayat. I don't anyway. I don't tell them, read, like, for example, keep reading over and over again. For example, I don't know, something to do with Allah being Al-Ghani, Huwa Al-Ghani, or something like that. Or I don't give them this. I give them the regular ruqyah program. I give them dua, and I give them a lot of advice on how to increase their rizq and how to stop the causes for your rizq being decreased. And I think we could apply this to many cases. I won't have time to tell you them all, but many, many situations when you look at it, it's not a ruqyah problem alone. It's a ruqyah problem and a dua problem and a obstacles problem and a sins problem and lots of other things. So give them the whole solution. Don't just give them one thing. Give them a holistic solution. Go search, if you don't know it, go search ways to increase your wealth. Go search, on Google, do a little search on, Islamic articles on means to increase your wealth and from reliable sources, etc. And, reasons why your dua is not answered and all of these different things. And then present them the whole thing in small chunks that they can do, because you have to give them tadarruj. You have to take them, step by step. You have to take them piece by piece. What you can't do is you can't give them everything in one go. Otherwise, if you give them everything in one go, they'll lose it in one go. And Allah Azza wa Jalla said about the Quran that we sent down, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the Quran in stages. And Allah said that this is better or this is how we make your heart firm. We make your heart firm. And that's a general principle in teaching, that you make people firm when you teach them in stages and you teach them in pieces. There's another principle that I think is really important, and I think this is a key to the issue of when ruqyah doesn't seem to be working. Okay? And I've mentioned this, I think, in my Overcoming Ruqyah Problems. And I mentioned a long thing about, at the end of the day, you have to have sabr, you have to know that it's from Allah. The Prophet ﷺ did not receive victory in a day or in 2 days. His victory took him, over 20 years before he had victory over his enemies in every regard. At the end of the day, you shouldn't expect your victory to come in a day or a week or a month. Having said that, There is one mistake I see a lot of people making in self-ruqyah particularly, and that is not pushing the boundaries. And I've mentioned it before, but I really want to emphasize this. Most people, when they do ruqyah, they do it up to a limit that they are comfortable with. And the raqi is the same. So the raqi goes in, does Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq until, he feels a bit like, I can't do anymore, and then stops. And what we don't do is we don't push the boundary. What you have to do is constantly push yourself to do a little bit more and push yourself a little bit harder. And some people, particularly you get some cases where the person will say, I can't read. I read Alhamd and I faint. And I say to them, that's absolutely fine. All I want you to do is to slowly increase the amount as best you can. So in the beginning you say Bismillah, and that's it. Then you say Bismillah, and then you faint. Then you wake up and you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and then you faint. And then you wake up and you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and then you faint. And you're pushing yourself all the time to just do a little bit more. It doesn't matter how much you're doing in the grand scheme of things, but it matters massively that you're pushing yourself. Because the shaitan, how do I explain this? The shaitan has a level at which the shaitan becomes very, very uncomfortable. And it's like anything, it's like exercise, like anything. When you push yourself, it's that last 5% when you push yourself that makes all the difference. So, you get someone going to the gym and, they start lifting weights and they only lift what they can manage easily. And then what happens is they don't see anything as getting better, but it's that last 5 or 10% that matters. Ruqyah is really, this is so applicable to Ruqyah, that it's the last 5-10% that you push yourself beyond what you thought you could do. That's when you get the biggest results. And if I see people who do Ruqyah who are really, really successful, one of the things I see in their Ruqyah is they push it. So they get to a point where the person can't take any more, and then they push it beyond that point. And they take it beyond that point. So it's the point where the person's screaming, it's a stop, I can't do it, I'm tired, my head is hurting, I can't read anymore, and they still read another 10 minutes. And that 10 minutes appears to me, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best, to be where the greatest effect is taking place. Because basically, shaitan pushes back against you. This is what I was trying to say. You push against the shaitan with Ruqyah, and the shaitan pushes back. There gets to a point where the shaitan reaches a peak of pushing against you because it's so painful to that shaitan, and that shaitan is pushing back against you, that what you tend to do at that point is just before you get to the peak, you stop because it's unbearable. If you can get over that peak, that is when you get the best results out of the Ruqyah. So you want to push yourself all the time a little bit more. Keep a record with the patient and always try and give them that little bit more intense, that little bit more recitation, that little bit longer keeping them awake before they faint, that little bit more of them reciting themselves, that little bit longer of, managing to control their anger or their reaction or whatever it is. You're just trying to get a little bit more every time. And what you find, these tiny increments add up to massively improved results in Ruqyah. I've seen this a lot of times. I've seen it not with myself, but with a lot of other people who do Ruqyah that I have a lot of respect for, that when I see them pushing the patient and pushing themselves, and one thing I do when I go into my Ruqyah session, I go in with a target of what I'm going to read. And I never ever go in just saying I'm just going to read. Because if I'm just going to read, shaitan is going to get in my head and say to me, that's enough. And I'll just finish with Fatiha and Ayatul Kursi and the Quls, and that's it, I'm going to finish. So what I do is I go in and say, I'm going to read for a minimum of 45 minutes. I'm going to read for a minimum of 45 minutes. And I don't ever go under that. If, the house is on fire or whatever, 45 minutes. And then try to push myself, the next stage is try to push myself beyond that, to always do 5 minutes more. To always, for that patient, to always try and be a little bit more intense, less talking at the beginning. Because you get in a Ruqyah session, you start, how are you last week, how are things? And then before you know it, half an hour is gone and you've got 15 minutes left. So what we tend to do is, try and always pushing ourselves to just be that little bit better. I found that is one of the major reasons for success in Ruqyah. One of the other things that I definitely wanted to talk about in this is self-adjustment of ruqyah. This is a very similar topic. So this is the topic of adjusting your ruqyah according to your sort of how you're monitoring yourself. Now, you can do it a wrong way, which is that every time the shaitan shouts, you change your ruqyah. That's wrong. But sensible adjustments over time are very sensible. So for example, you've been doing ruqyah 45 minutes a day for the last month, and you've seen an improvement, but you still feel like you have quite a long way to go. It might be very sensible to up that to an hour, for example. Not just in time, you can also up it in intensity as well, in terms of really focusing more, working on, sort of drinking water, ruqyah water while you're doing it. So you can increase it in intensity, you can also increase it in time, you can also increase in sort of, the variation of the surahs you're reading and so on and so forth. But what we really want people to do is adjust it. So as a raqi, you're always looking at things over a long period of time. Don't look over a short period, because a short period gives you false results and you get a bit, you start doing things because the shaitan wants you to do things. But over a longer period, you start looking at yourself and saying, well, is my ruqyah enough? Is 45 minutes enough? Well, maybe not. I need to up this. I'm reading Al-Baqarah now once a week. I need to make this once every 2 weeks. And you're pushing yourself and adjusting your ruqyah according to how you see yourself or the patient is doing over a long period of time and what you think might be missing. And another thing I always advise people to do is to always take themselves to account when it comes to ruqyah and just go back to the basics and say, right, am I doing everything right? Am I reading what I should be reading? Am I doing this? I use my own website as a checklist. I go through my own website and say, am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? So that I have an idea and a concept in my mind that I know that I've gone back to basics. And this is really important when you get the horrible case study where someone comes and says, I've done everything and nothing's working. Now, if you're a doctor, you might say the medication's wrong, we need to change your medication. But as a Muslim reading Quran, you know the Quran is the right medication. So you need to go right back to the beginning and say, right, zero, reset to zero, let's begin again, Tawbah, Ikhlas, Niyyah, Sunnah, let's start again, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And very often when you make dua for Allah to open up your mind to see what the problem is, your mind will be opened and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you where your flaw is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you. And there's no specific dua for that. There's nothing like, oh Allah, show me this particular flaw. But whatever dua you make, you ask Allah that He is Al-Fattah, He is Al-Jabbar, that show me where my weakness is. Inspire me to get rid of my weakness and help me to get rid of my weakness. And what you often find is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up the door for you. When you feel like you're really stuck, follow the example of the Prophet ﷺ and pray 2 rak'ah. When the Prophet ﷺ would become troubled by a matter, he would go to the prayer. Go and pray 2 rak'ah and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open up, say to Him that He is Al-Fattah. Al-Fattah, open up a door for me, open up a way for me. Let me see where am I going wrong? And you keep on pushing, you keep on adjusting, and you keep on analyzing and checking yourself. Those 3 go together. I think they're absolutely critical, whether you're doing self-ruqyah or ruqyah for other people. Keep on sort of pushing yourself, keep on adjusting what you're doing, and most importantly, keep on checking yourself and don't be frightened to just go back to basics. Reset, especially if you feel like the world is just spinning and you just don't have any clue what's going on. Okay, it's like, when we have these problems, you have problems at work. If you work in something and your machinery you're fixing at work doesn't work, often what you do is you just zero yourself, just go back to zero. Okay, is it plugged in? Is it switched on? Is, the on button pressed? Is like you do these basic checks. And it doesn't hurt to do them in ruqyah as well. Am I doing this? Am I doing this? Where might I be going wrong? So I think those are some quite fundamental principles. And there are a couple or 3 more sort of generic principles I want to talk to you about. I'm going as quick as I can. One of them is whenever you talk to people about trusting in Allah, you need to tell them the essence of tawakkul. And the essence of tawakkul is do your best and leave the rest to Allah. That is the essence of tawakkul. And what you get is, you get people who fall on either side of that. Either they are doing their best, but they're not trusting in Allah. Yani they think that they are the only cause. Look, I'm reading, I'm not getting better. Okay, but you're reading and trusting that Allah is going to cure you, or you're just reading and saying, I've read 2 pages, why haven't I been cured? On the other side, you have people who trust in Allah, a false trust, and they don't try their best. And those people are also guilty. So what you want to look at for your patients is whenever you're telling them, like we said in the financial issue, like we said in the issue of trying for a baby, that you're telling them about tawakkul and trust in Allah, then what you're trying to do is, you're trying to see where they might be imbalanced. Are they trying really hard, but not letting go? You know, they're trying really, really hard, but they're not letting go. They're not doing tafweed, al-amr ilallah, just letting go of everything and leaving it to Allah. Or are they, on the other side, leaving everything to Allah, but not doing anything? And so you want to bring them into the point where they try their absolute best, and they're literally, you know, blood, sweat and tears, everything they can to get it done, and at the same time they have a confidence and they have a trust that Allah will deliver them and Allah will take them out of the problem that they're in. Another one that I wanted to talk about very specifically is the topic of general and targeted ruqyah. So during the ruqyah session, one of the things that you see during the ruqyah session is you see various parts of the body being affected. So you might see a person affected in their arm. So their arm starts, you know, going like this, or their finger just goes like this, or their face twists, or their head, or, you know, some really weird things happen, like their face can turn into someone else, and all sorts of strange things. But you see a particular part of the body being affected. You have a general ruqyah, and you can also target your ruqyah to a specific place. And there are lots of ways to do this. This is really a bit like a slightly more advanced topic of targeting your ruqyah. So general ruqyah, you're sitting there, you're reading and you're blowing. You're reading, you're blowing, you're reading, you're blowing. Targeted ruqyah, you've got a couple of options. One thing that you can do is to focus your reading on the area which seems to be affected. Now you can have some complex problems in there, you can have multiple jinn and some other things, but just, you know, trying to give some focus to the area. So if it's the hand that's going like this, you can take hold of the hand. Obviously, if it's a sister, she has to be a mahram, otherwise tell her mahram to take hold of her hand. And you can focus on the hand. And you might see a reaction, you might see the hand go down and the other hand go up. Focus on the hand. Chase the shaitan around the body. Don't let the shaitan get comfortable and sit in one place. Sometimes the patient will tell you, it's in my head. You know, it's in the back of my head and my head is heavy and like this. So you can put your hand on the back of the head. You can blow in your hand, touch your hand. You can touch your hand to the place of pain. You can read the dua for pain. You can read ruqyah with your hand on that place. Again, if the sister is not a mahram, you will ask the mahram to do that. Instead of you blow on the mahram's hand and let the mahram put their hand on the lady instead, inshallah. And so on and so forth. If you don't have a mahram there, but you have another sister, then you just, you know, you keep away. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. You keep away and just do your generic ruqyah. You know, but you're targeting that particular place with reading. Or you're targeting that particular place with touching. By touching your hand on that particular place where you can often feel the jinn. You know, sometimes you can even catch them. You know, you can even catch them in a certain place where they stay there and they're kind of like going crazy. The hand is going crazy, you know, it's like shaking backwards and forwards. And you've just caught them in a particular place, knowing that they travel through the blood. You can just catch them in a particular place and focus your reading on that particular area. One thing you can do is, I really dislike hitting, as I said. But what I do like is targeted massage. I think it works almost as well as hitting. And it saves you from so many problems that hitting gives you. So this is to, for example, take the place where the jinn is causing the most problem and just give it some pressure, give it a gentle massage, and this is very, very painful. You can see the jinn is really hurting, but the best bit about it is if you get it wrong, the person is not hurting. Hitting, if you get it wrong, the person's going to get hurt. Massaging, if you get it wrong, the person is not going to get hurt. And someone might say, well, it's better, it's more powerful if you hit the jinn, but the downsides are too great, the risk is too high. Versus the sort of targeted pressure or massage where you're just sort of like targeting the area where the jinn is, giving it a hard time, blowing, putting some pressure, putting some massage, following it around. It goes into the shoulder, getting the shoulder, and again, targeting that area, blowing on that area, focusing your reading on that area. The other thing you can do is to target it using, for example, water or olive oil. So if you see in a certain place, especially with the sisters, this works also very well. If you can't go near to her, then maybe you have a little bit of a spray can, and you can, with her permission prior to the Ruqyah session, you can just spray some, Ruqyah water over in the direction of the area which is being afflicted. Or you could even better than that, which is even better, is you have a sister in there who is your assistant, who is like kind of taking care of the sister. You don't even need to look at her, and she can see it's in the hand, and she just, sprays a little bit of the water or gives her a little bit of a massage on her hand, and then suddenly what you're seeing is you're putting so much more pressure on the jinn. Instead of just letting the jinn go and have a free rein and just zip around the body, you're stopping it, you're pushing it, you're pressurizing it, you're giving it some pain. Like I sometimes do, there are different kinds of massage. I mean, you can give it a little, like a little like this, a little tap. You can give it a squeeze, as long as it wouldn't hurt the person, as long as the person wouldn't object to it when they were awake, and it's no big deal. This is a good replacement for beating somebody. It's not as satisfying, but it's a good replacement for beating somebody, okay? Like, so you just, give them a tap, give them a pressure, give them a massage, and really just try and catch the jinn in a particular place. If it's not clear to you where the jinn is, don't do it. Just keep with your general ruqyah. What happens if it's inside? It's in my stomach. This person's stomach bloats up like a massive big, beach ball. Yeah, and like it's getting bigger and bigger, and you're thinking they're just going to pop. Again, look at what you can do to target that area from the outside and the inside. From the inside, ruqyah water, or spray down their throat. Ruqyah water is nicer, but sometimes they won't take it. Like quite a lot, you'll give it to them, they'll just spit it at you, So sometimes having a little spray and just gently spraying the water down their throat, and every now and again, sometimes I'll hold their nose if they're really like not taking it, until they open their mouth, and then just a little bit. But you've got to be careful about that because it's kind of illegal in some countries. So, sometimes you just nip their nose or whatever, and they open their mouth, and then you just give them a little bit of ruqyah water. It's going into the stomach. But then target from the outside. Hand on the stomach, blow on the hand, touch the hand, the dua for pain, and you're just targeting it wherever it's going. And I think this is one of the ways you can make your ruqyah a lot more effective and a lot more powerful in the same space of time, is by really being awake and attuned to what's happening and really following the shaitan and not giving the shaitan any peace of mind. I also do that with myself. So if I feel, and people are always shocked, the most shocking thing that I ever seem to get emails about is whenever I say that I had a problem with the jinn or some like issue happened to me, people email me and say, it shook my faith in, in whatever, because, you're not supposed to get these problems. Why? SubhanAllah, I sin like the rest of you, at the end of the day. And I forget my adhkar, and I sometimes don't do what I should do, and sometimes it's a test from Allah Azza wa Jal. And like I said, you never met a tandoori chef who didn't burn his fingers. So you never also met a raqi that sometimes didn't get an affliction from time to time. But if I feel while I'm reading on someone, I'm getting a pain, I'm also not going to give the shaitan any free time. I'm going to get on myself, start blowing, start holding, start rubbing on here, start reading on myself, because that shaitan is coming from that other person, and we don't want to give them any peace at all. We want to make it so uncomfortable for them and so difficult for them that they are pressured to leave much more quickly. And it's like this. It's like there are lots of ways to defeat your enemy. If you are just, striking your enemy every now and again, it's going to take a long time. If you're putting so much pressure that the shaitan can't turn left or right without getting hit by water, ruqyah, oil, your hand, something is coming in somewhere, everywhere the shaitan tries to hide in the foot, you're there. Tries to hide in the hand, you're there. Tries to get in the stomach, you're there. What happens is the ruqyah becomes a lot more powerful and a lot more effective in a shorter space of time. It's a lot more intense for the person, and that matches our concept of increasing intensity. on that topic, or we'll first deal with a slightly different topic when we talk about the topic of, or actually we'll move on. Yeah, we'll move on to the topic of the house, because this leads us on to the topic of the house quite well. A lot of people have problems in their homes, in their houses, and they believe that the problem is not with them. And I agree that is possible. First kind of note I would give you is don't presume. Don't presume they don't have a problem, because people say, people come to you and say, yeah, my house is infested with jinn. They open the wardrobes, throw the pans around, switch the lights on, open the windows, and I'm terrified, my kids are terrified, etc., etc. Don't presume that it's only in the house and it's not with the person. Check. Do ruqyah on them outside of the house. Give yourself a good idea whether you think they are also afflicted. Many times, not always, but let's say 30-40% of the time, they will also have an affliction, and their affliction may be the primary reason. So you're saying, like, you give them the advice for reading in the house and they go and do it, but then they're not getting any better, and you realize the reason they're not getting any better is the affliction is also within them and not just within the house. So how do you deal with the house? Apart from dealing with the person and doing ruqyah on the person, which is very valid. How do you deal with the house? One of the things that's vital on the non-ruqyah side is purifying the house of those things which cause the angels not to enter the house and cause the shaitan to enter the house. Many times we've said to people, some people hang out a flag on their wall that says, Marhaban bi-shayateen, welcome shaitan. Because literally their house is full of things which bring the shaitan. Now that doesn't have to be just TV and music, although TV and music are definitely at the top of the list, along with pictures, and I'm really strict on pictures. I'm stricter maybe than I don't know, am I stricter than we need to be, but I'm super strict on this. I cover all pictures in the house, whether they are like in kids' books or anything else, kids' toys, I cover them all. The only thing I allow my daughter is a roughly sort of rag doll made out of material based on the hadith of Aisha and nothing else. And I'm super strict about going through my house and removing pictures. With paint pens, with markers, with scissors, with Stanley knives, with sandpaper, you name it. I had a Dremel multi-tool for a while that I used to scrape the things off. I'm really obsessive about getting rid of pictures, but at least you should be, starting that process of getting rid of pictures of living things, faces. If you've got nice photographs, scan them, keep them on the computer where they're not on display. Don't put them in a drawer, don't put them in a cupboard. Get rid of the pictures in your house. Get rid of the TV. Because you might say, I only watch Quran channel or whatever the thing is, but if that's true, then that's a blessing from Allah that has lasted until now, but you have no guarantee it will not last until tomorrow, because I don't think it's possible to only get that channel. It's always possible to flick and get another channel. Get rid of the TV. TV goes. You got jinn in your house, you don't have jinn in your house, whatever, get rid of the TV. Music. Again, some people will say, well, it's not in my control, it's my mum, it's my dad. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah as much as you can. If you only do it from your room and that's all you can control, that's all you can control. But not just those things. Also, the behavior of the people in the house. So things like not praying in the house. The Prophet ﷺ said, don't make your houses like graveyards. Don't make it that nobody prays in the house. Pray your sunnah. If you're a man, if you're a lady, pray your fard in the house. About arguments and marital discord and people swearing by Allah too much and saying bad language and things that draw the shaitan, anger. That you go in some houses and there's a feeling of just anger in the air. Everybody's angry with everyone, and the shaitan can cause that. But at the same time, they have to do their best effort to reduce that characteristic within themselves. And that's going to lead me to another point which I'm going to make in just a moment. But you need to remove things which displease Allah and put things in that please Allah. Because we have a principle, I've talked about it I think in Bulugh al-Maram, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned regarding the Qibla, وَلَكِنْ شَرِّقُوا أَوْ غَرِّبُوا. Turn to the east or turn to the west. And that's a principle of when you take something away from someone and say, don't do this, give them an alternative. Get rid of the music, replace it with Quran, poetry, duroos, podcasts, whatever it takes. Anything that doesn't have music in, do that. Step number 2, TV, don't just, get rid of the TV and have nothing. Like either cut your satellite connection or your whatever and just connect something to it where you can watch beneficial things or whatever. Replace it again with reading Quran, with sitting together, having a meal together as a family instead of having the TV on and all sitting around the TV, like sitting on a dining table. Honestly, I think one of the best things you can do if you get rid of your TV is replace it with somewhere where the family can sit together and eat. And just be like, turn the sofas towards each other and people can actually just talk to each other and not be like phones and TVs and whatever. All of these sort of things about improving the situation in the house and replacing it with something good. If the family's, arguing and bad words are being said, arrange for a little halaqah in the house, a little remembrance, a little reading of Quran together, some family time. All these things, you're taking something away and replacing it with something else. I find this to be one of the major causes for improving the situation in the house. If you do come across anything suspicious, like a ta'weez or something like that, then they have to go. Any of these i'tiqad, which are like strange, things that are given to give you blessings on your house and things like that, or black cloths or chili powder on the floor, whatever it is people do to keep evil spirits, nails in the corner of the room, all of them have to go. Because all of them are either shirk or bid'ah, and most of them are shirk. You get rid of them, and likewise, then you start treating the house. How do you treat the house? Wallahi, I've seen 2 opinions in this from the people who we have a lot of knowledge on this topic and they respect. But the one that my nafs is happy with is not to do ruqyah for the house, as in to do ruqyah and blow on the walls or read on water and spray the walls. Wallahi, I don't say it's haram. Allah knows best. I don't know what the ruling is, and I've struggled with that. But what my, like they say, ma tatma'innu ilayhi nafsi, what my soul is happy with is the recitation of Surah Al-Baqarah in the room where you are having the most problem. Because Surah Al-Baqarah protects your house from the shayateen, it brings the angels that listen to the Quran, it makes your home a place of dhikr and barakah. And Surah Al-Baqarah is very powerful against the shaitan. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَخْذُهَا بَرَكَةً وَتَرْكُهَا حَسْرَةً وَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُهَا الْبَطَلَ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Taking it is barakah, leaving it is loss, and the magicians cannot do anything against it. Read Surah Al-Baqarah and other parts of the Quran, but particularly Surah Al-Baqarah. I would say no more than 3 days, like no less than twice a week. No more than 3 days go by without you reading Surah Al-Baqarah again and again and again in the house. So for example, you could do a third, and a third, or you could do it in one go. I do recommend that you try to find where the cause of the problem is. Just out of experience, there's no sunnah for it, but just out of experience, I found that if you do it in the room where the greatest problem is being caused, it seems to have a better effect. You can combine it with ruqyah for a person, no reason why not. Why you can't have your family members sat in front of you, a little bit of ruqyah for them when you're reading Surah Al-Baqarah with the intention of protecting the house, and then the dua for going in the house, or the dua for going in the house being Bismillah and Assalamu alaikum. There is this dua Bismillahi walajna is not authentic. Then the dua for going out of the house, and the dua for going into the bathroom and out of the bathroom, these are key because these are the vulnerable areas in your house. Where's the vulnerable area in your house? The door, front door, the bathroom doors. These are your vulnerable areas in your house. Things like closing the windows and doors at night. I have a full article on the virtues of closing the windows and doors at night and saying Bismillah when you do so, because the Prophet ﷺ said, for indeed the shaitan does not open a door or a window or something which is locked by saying Bismillah. Something when you said Bismillah and you closed it, the shaitan does not open it. So these are sort of key things. Your front door, so who comes in and who comes out. One of the things is you don't let people who are, ideally, who are really, sort of evil and bad people sort of in. But even if, you come in, you're talking about Bismillah when people come in, Assalamu alaikum, when they go out, making dua, when they go into the bathroom, when they get out of the bathroom, and closing the windows and doors at night. and mentioning the name of Allah Azza wa Jal as you do that, especially not leaving them open at Maghrib and between Maghrib and Isha. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ لِلشَّيْطَانِ انْتِشَارًا وَخَطْفًا أو كما قال, that the shaitan spreads out and snatches people at that time. That's why you get the worst ruqyah reactions always come at Maghrib. Because the shaitan spreads out at that time and snatches and takes over people at that time. So this is a key time to, again, keep the windows and doors closed, keep children in at Maghrib as best you can. You know, you don't have to be like crazy about it, that Maghrib comes and it's like, you know, just a curfew, you have to like barricade yourself inside your house, but just be sensible about it, that when you don't leave your children playing outside, going somewhere unnecessarily, you know, outside at Maghrib time, and instead of that, you know, you keep them in the house at that time or in the car, wherever, and you mention the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, Bismillah, frequently. When you eat, you say Bismillah so that you don't let the shaitan eat with you. You know, when you go to sleep, you do your adhkar. This is a house where you don't think the shaitan is going to stay in it very long. Because it's going to be, imagine how horrible that is for the shaitan. The person wakes up in the morning, dhikr, fajr, praying the sunnah in the house, reading Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, all the haram is taken out of it. It's a good environment, seeking knowledge, family are happy together. Then they do more adhkar at Asr time. Then they do more Quran. Then they pray some sunnah prayers there, maybe after Maghrib, after Isha. They pray tahajjud there. And you just got a house that the shaitan is just going to hate. You know, like every time they go in the bathroom, they say the dua. Every time they come out, they say ghufranak. Every time they, you know, they come in the door, they say Bismillah, and they give the salam. Every time they go out, they say the dua for leaving. Every time, you know, Maghrib comes, they close the windows and the doors and they say Bismillah over them when they close them. You know what, you don't imagine the shaitan is going to remain in that situation for a very long time, especially if there's no magic keeping them there. And the last point I would mention about the home is sometimes you do have, the reason is there has been some magic done there and the magic still remains in that place. Again, I'm kind of a balanced person. I don't think you should rip your floorboards up and, you know, start like, you know, taking the wallpaper down and looking for things, but it doesn't hurt to have a once over the house. I tend to have a once over my house looking for pictures that have crept in and anything that might be untoward. So you might see, oh, subhanAllah, there's a, you know, I'll tell you a story, real thing happened to me. I came back home when I was in the UK and I opened the door and said Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum, in I went, and straight away in unison, all my kids started screaming. Like, I'm talking about 1, 2, 3, or 2, I don't remember, there were 2 of them at that time, or 3. Anyways, they all started screaming in unison, not like one woke them up and the other, they were all in different rooms. And like together, they started crying, screaming their heads off like they've had a really bad nightmare. So I went upstairs, read a little bit on them, blew over them, put them back down to bed, etc. And then I put my hand in my pocket and I realized why. I realized someone had given me a ta'weez to destroy and get rid of, and I had meant to leave it in the car and then get rid of it in the morning, because it was very, very late at night. It was like midnight or 1 in the morning. And I had forgotten, and I'd left it in my pocket, and I walked in the house, and the second I walked in the house just went crazy. Got rid of the and I went outside in the garden right then. I didn't even leave it. I just went straight outside to the back of the garden, got rid of the ta'weez. I've got an article on how to do that on my website, how to destroy a ta'weez. Got rid of it, job done. And came back in, house is all silent, everyone is calm, no more problem that night. So sometimes you do find something in the house that's crept in that shouldn't be there. I don't think you should rip your house apart, but I think that it's sensible to just look at the stuff in your house for haram things, maybe any sort of strange objects, hair, nails, weird things previous tenants might have left that might be related to magic, because sometimes those can bring the jinn in, and sometimes maybe someone was practicing magic in that house and that was why the jinn have chosen to reside there, and you really have to push them out. You have to find where they're located and you have to really target them with ruqyah, with the recitation of Surah Al-Baqarah, with recitation of the people in the house, with the adhkar, with making the house a place of being beloved to Allah Azza wa Jal, all the other things that we have said. So I think that is a major thing. There was one point I wanted to come back to. I'm still on these points. I'm trying my best to get through as many as possible. And that is character flaws and the shaitan. I talked about arguments in the house, okay? About people arguing with one another in the house. One thing I want you to understand is it is very, very, very rare very rare indeed. In fact, almost never, that the shaitan starts with a blank page when it comes to magic or jinn possession or causing evil in the house. It's very rare the shaitan starts with a blank page. The shaitan will work with what is already there. So if you have a tendency for your eye to wander and maybe look at things it shouldn't, you'll find that when you're afflicted by magic, that is much, much worse. And you may be, like falling into some serious sins in that regard. If you're a person who is tempted by money and maybe not so careful about halal, haram money, this will get much, much worse when you're afflicted by magic, even if the magic has nothing to do with the money. Because the shaitan works with what is already there. If you're naturally an angry person, then the shaitan is going to make your anger many, many times worse. Now, that actually leads us to a solution. You might think I've just described a problem, but I've also described a solution, which is aside from ruqyah, if you work on that flaw in your character, the shaitan will no longer have any material to work with. And the shaitan will no longer be able to overcome you. So if you're having a lot of arguments because of magic or jinn problems, working on your temperament and working on lowering your general anger and working on hilm, being sort of gentle and soft and patient and considerate and having rifq and lean and being gentle and kind, this is fundamental to getting rid of the problem. Because the shaitan is only working with what is already there in most cases. The shaitan is working with what is already present within the person. And if you understand this, this has been something that I felt gave my ruqyah such a boost that, there's certain sort of things in my, I don't call it a career, but my life doing ruqyah that I have seen have just gone, whoa, that's like just made everything so much better. And this is one of them. Realizing that the shaitan does not start from a blank page. The shaitan starts with what is already there. So if you can correct what is already there, then the shaitan will no longer have the ability to manipulate you in that way. And we'll move on to something else, because we all have flaws, right? We never can remove all of our flaws. But if you are suffering from something, or you've got a patient suffering from something, and that patient says to you, my biggest problem is ... Don't just say, okay, ruqyah. Say also, what is the flaw in their character that is allowing the shaitan the ability to manipulate them in that particular way? So if it's anger, we need to get rid of this anger problem from their character and not just blame it on the shaitan. A lot of people say, am I blameworthy for what happens to me when I'm afflicted? And a lot of people just give the answer and they say, rufi' al-qalam an thalath. The pen is lifted from 3 and you're like the insane person, so there's no sin on you. I don't say that to people. I say, if it is solely from the shaitan, then there is no sin on you. But the majority of people, it is not solely from the shaitan. It is a flaw in your character that the shaitan is taking advantage of. And so if you can correct that, that is what you have to do. You're not blameworthy for what the shaitan does to you, but you are blameworthy for that original flaw that is letting the shaitan get to you. It can be emotion, speaking without knowledge, backbiting, anger, suspicion, whatever it is, this flaw that's there, and the shaitan just makes it 100 times worse. Say, I'm really suspicious of my wife, I don't know what she's doing, and I think something's going on. And we know it's sihr. But often that person would have had that kind of suspicion on a lesser scale before they were afflicted by magic, and then what's happened is the magic has just made it much, much, much worse.